All right. Kenmore, are you ready, Anastasia?
We are.
Kenmore City Council is now in session. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember O'Kane.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Herbig.
Here.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Here.
Mayor Baker.
Here.
Councilmember File.
Here.
Councilmember Curtis.
Present.
Councilmember Marshall.
Present.
All right. Next item on the agenda is the flag salute. Will you please join me in the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice
Justice for all.
Thanks for the flag, Mr. City Manager. All right, next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. If there are no objections, the agenda will stand approved as written. Next item on the agenda is a proclamation. And whereas the freedoms we enjoy as Americans have been purchased and maintained at a high price throughout our nation's history. Whereas since the establishment of the United States of America, Americans have fought and died to preserve our individual rights as guaranteed in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And whereas we owe a great deal or a great debt to those who have served in defense of this nation. And whereas throughout the generations, their sacrifices have preserved our unique form of government dedicated to human rights and respect for the individual. And whereas for many, that sacrifice ended in permanent injury or death, yet their spirit remains in the continued preservation of our freedoms and the promise of liberty established as an example for all oppressed persons of the world. And whereas in honor of these fine, dedicated individuals, we pledge continued defense of our nation so that their sacrifice will stand before the entire world as a tribute to the spirit and determination of people dedicated to the principles of freedom and democracy. Now, therefore, do hereby call upon the citizenry of Kenmore to join in the celebration, giving honor and recognition to all of those who have served by observing November 11th as Veterans Day, with expressions of gratitude for veterans, and to further extend this gratitude to the families of deceased veterans. For we solemnly remember that sacrifices of all of those who fought so valiantly on the seas, in the air, and away on foreign shores to preserve our nation's heritage and freedom. Let us reconsecrate ourselves to the task of promoting and enduring peace so that their efforts shall not have been in vain. And now, therefore, be it resolved, I, David Baker, Mayor of the City of Kenmore, Washington, together and on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim the week of November 9th through November 13th as Veterans in Focus Appreciation Week in our fine city of Kenmore. All right. Next item on the agenda is recognition. Mr. King.
Thank you, Mayor. Peter King with the Association of Washington Cities. Thanks, Mayor and members of the council, for giving me a couple of minutes to be with you this evening. I know you have a busy agenda. Let me first say I wish I was there in person. I think you're probably getting a little weary of Zoom meetings, as am I. Would much prefer to be there with you at City Hall, or I know you would prefer to be able to be together or with your citizens. But I am here to present an advanced certificate of municipal leadership to Councilmember File. She joins Mayor Baker as the second person from Kenmore with this advanced certificate. A little bit of background on the program for those of you who may not be familiar. Our Certificate of Municipal Leadership offers all mayors and council members in our 281 cities an opportunity to gain knowledge and skills to effectively operate within the law, to plan properly, to secure and manage funds, and foster community and staff relationships. It was created almost 25 years ago now, and the basic certificate is a 30-hour or 30-credit program. The advanced certificate, which we're talking about this evening, was added later, and it requires an additional 30 credits, and that can be met through AWC trainings or other non-AWC courses, plus a community services component. And that can be boards and commissions, which I know that you all serve on. You know, over the years, about 1,100 elected officials have completed the basic certificate, and about 350 have completed the advanced. So on average, maybe a dozen or so mayors or council members each year reach that threshold. So all of you as elected officials are automatically enrolled in the program, and anytime you attend an AWC event, that logs in, and you can go in on our website and check your progress toward the certificate or the advanced certificate. So as even prior to COVID, we were making a real effort to move much of our content online, recognizing that, you know, people had limited time and limited travel. Certainly COVID accelerated that work. So our annual conference in June was fully online. If you're interested, you can go in and listen to those recorded sessions and earn up to 10 credits by doing that. In 1 week in August, we had a day-long session on budgeting that's recorded and available to all of you. We did a 2-hour training on race, equity, and leadership, and then we followed that with a conference on smaller cities and CARES Act money that had a number of mayors and the Department of Commerce. So all of that information is available on our website. So we're making it as easy as possible for city officials to hit that 30 credits or the 60 credits in a virtual format. So the advanced certificate really acknowledges a continued commitment to education and community service through these additional trainings. So I am with you to acknowledge and congratulate Councilmember Peel for achieving the advanced certificate. So rather than, if I were there in person, I would have a nice certificate to hand you. But on behalf of the AWC President, Sue Ing Moody, who's the mayor of Twist, and the AWC Board of Directors, I extend my sincere congratulations to Councilmember File for your achievement and dedication to continued education on behalf of your community and the citizens of Kenmore. So congratulations. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. King. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on the agenda, public comments. This is an opportunity to express your views on issues that are important to you and to the community. And if we can have you please state your name and city of residence and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Will the clerk please call the first person?
Nadia Silver.
Hello, my name is Nadia Reyna Silver, Doctor of Divinity. I live in Kenmore, Washington. First, I'd like to thank City Council for honoring our veterans who've gladly and freely given of themselves for us to have the right to be ourselves. So if you're pagan, LGBT, Black, immigrant, nationalized, veteran, all are respected veterans and deserve to be recognized. So thank you for recognizing that. Second, I'd like to congratulate our most esteemed council member on her most recent certification. I am so proud to have somebody in my city that goes that extra mile. And I'm certain long hours, of course, and dedication to our community were equally just necessary. And well done, you've earned it. I'm super proud of you. The next thing is 3 years ago and since, I brought the issue of over-the-counter drug abuse, DXM and triple C's, also known as clonazepam. I brought that issue to the City Council 3 years ago on our Kenmore teens. The problem had landed in my own home 3 years ago, starting and since with my own teen, and it caught me completely off guard. So my intent was to spread awareness. What I was met with by our own mayor, unfortunately, was deflection and derision. Consistently, I was told the problem needs to be addressed at the county and state level, not the city level. And taking that advice, I've gone to Olympia, I've attended meetings and spoken with Congresswoman Susan Albini, myself, and state representatives Javier Valdez, Jerry Paulette, on multiple occasions about this issue. To date, I have been the only active concerned parent on this issue for 3 years. It's nice to know even our mayor can grow and that I'm no longer fighting a non.
Have we lost?
Ms. Silver, we can't hear you.
We lost audio? Yeah, I think we've lost audio.
Ms. Silver, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Kenmore Community of Friend is still open and available to the public with K95 masks, courtesy of the Kenmore Free Store. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Stacy. Stacy.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to also extend a big thank you to the City Council and the City Manager for honoring our veterans and family of veterans with the proclamation for Veterans Day. I'd also like to congratulate Karina. And then also, I would like to stress that we need the city to trim the budget and freeze adding expenses, including holding back from hiring, using consultants, or increasing any taxes of our residents earning less than $150,000 annually until we see how long this pandemic will last and the financial hardship our residents will be faced with. It is a time to make sacrifices, go without luxury items, and help each other survive this hardship. Many businesses are having to close. That means many will lose jobs. Many food banks have seen those in need at an all-time high, and food insecurity is rapid. Adding to this burden at this time is unjust. Kenmore can do better. Kenmore is a great giving community. Our community needs our city to be supportive as well, not to be taxing at this time. Thank you, and I hope you'll take this into consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Peoples, John Peoples.
Yes, John Peoples, Kenmore. Good evening, City Council. Thanks again for the time. I'd like to start tonight by asking the council to continue to find ways to save money and cut expenses before raising taxes on Kenmore's residents. Next, I'd like to remind the council of my opposition to the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Initiative, especially the prospect of spending money on a municipal salary dedicated to it. All Americans should know how to participate in the happenings and workings of our city's civic life. The council meetings and other events are well advertised on the website, and City Hall itself is clearly marked and visible from the street. The invitation to come on in, take your rightful place, and get involved just about couldn't be clearer. In this month of and season of gratitude for our nation's many blessings, I look forward to Thanksgiving Day in this year, the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the Mayflower in the New World. I invite the council and my Kenmore neighbors to join me in being forever grateful for the result of the 2016 presidential election. That night was a godsend for America. I invite everyone to join me in expressing gratitude for the blessings of having President Trump at the helm of the federal government executive branch during the last nearly 4 years and absorbing the vicious onslaught of hatred and media misbehavior directed at him. I hope we continue to reap the benefits of his policy accomplishments for years to come. I'm grateful to Alex Trebek, who for 36 years brought Americans good, clean, family-friendly, and intellectually stimulating entertainment. Rest in peace, Mr. Trebek. I'm grateful that, at least for now, we are free to speak our minds and without fear of being thrown in jail or fired from our jobs for expressing unpopular views, or at least views unpopular with a vocal, physically intimidating minority. I invite all Kenmore residents to join me in committing to never treating anyone in this way. I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, and have had a front row seat to Joe Biden's slick political machinations. So I remind myself and others that not all votes have been counted. I trust that my Kenmore neighbors will, at the very least, allow President Trump the same leeway the nation gave Al Gore in pursuing remedies to what appeared to him to be legal wrongdoing. Before anyone celebrates, we should wait until all 50 state elections are certified by the only legal authorities whose job it is to make those calls, the 50 secretaries of state, not the news media in its inglorious bias. Lastly, thank you for the Veterans Day proclamation. All you veterans out there are greatly appreciated. And congratulations to Councilmember Vile. Well done. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. David Morton. Mr. David Morton.
Yes, there I am. Good evening, council members and mayor. I'm David Morton. I live near Redmond. According to the pscleanair.org website, Puget Sound Clean Air Agency, PSCAA, works to protect public health, improve neighborhood air quality, and reduce our region's contribution to climate change. PSCAA says they will achieve clean, healthy air for everyone in their jurisdiction all the time. PSCAA commits to be good and wise stewards of resources given to them, defend the future, prevent and reduce risk to people by upholding and enforcing the law, protect us from air pollution, tell us what's in the air we are breathing. PSCAA also permits the construction of heavy industries like asphalt plants and regulates their activities, including activities that generate odors, which could be a nuisance to neighboring communities. PSCAA is authorized by the State Clean Air Act to issue civil penalties to companies who violate the Clean Air Act or PSCAA's regulations. Businesses pay annual fees that provide revenue for agency regulatory activities and reflect the estimated level of effort for PSCAA to ensure compliance with air quality regulations. This complies by annual on-site inspections performed by PSCAA inspectors. On 9/11/2017, such an on-site compliance evaluation was conducted by PSCAA Inspector Hudson at Cadman's Hot Mix Asphalt HMA facility in Kenmore. During this inspection, Inspector Hudson noted that Cadman plant operator Bauer mentioned the facility's medium cure asphalt tank 3 times. That tank is one of 2 tanks that are directly connected to the plant's drum mixer so that their contents can be fed into the drum mixer. One tank holds 20 gallons, the other holds 10,000 gallons. Plant operator Bauer said medium cure tank received regular refills. Medium cure asphalt is an obvious reference to medium curing cutback asphalt, which is asphalt cement dissolved in kerosene or jet fuel. On October 26, 2020, Dr. Zinn and Ms. McDonough of Cadman met with members of Kenmore staff. In that meeting, it was claimed that Cadman hasn't used cutback asphalt containing kerosene or jet fuel for 10 or 20 years. On November 2nd, Dr. Zinn told Kenmore City Council that medium cure cutback asphalt is not being used at our facilities. And that claims to the contrary are misinformation. Is Dr. Zinn asking us to believe that the PSCAA inspection report is misinformation? Thank you.
Thank you. John Adamski. John Adamski.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is John Adamski. I'm a 50-year citizen of Kenmore, and I live on Arrowhead Point waterfront, and I am the president of the Waterfront Community Service Group. I'm here to talk about the agenda item tonight on control of aquatic weeds, the IAVMP as it is called. I'm a strong advocate for weed management in the lake, and I'm thankful to have been included in the development of the original plan in 2017. The waterfront communities of Arrowhead and Inglewood have dealt with an increasing problem of aquatic weeds in Lake Washington, as Lake Washington has clarified over several years and sunlight is reaching deeper into the lake and is accelerating the growth of aquatic weeds. The private property neighborhoods strongly supported the creation of the overall plan to reduce the impact of weeds on lake use for boating and swimming. The neighborhoods were looking for some help to understand the reasons for increased weed growth and to find out what could be done to stop the infestations of the weeds that were coming to the surface early in the summer and really degrading the quality of the water for paddling, swimming, and powerboating. The initial aquatic weed plan helped with a weed survey over the full Kenmore waterfront and establishment of a general aquatic weed treatment permit to allow qualified contractors to safely use herbicides. And the private neighborhoods did contract with the herbicide applicators to kill the weeds in 2018, 2019, and 2020, but those treatments were frankly disappointing. Since they happened late in the summer due to the Washington State Ecology restrictions on timing to protect salmon runs, and by the time the weeds were treated, they'd already been at the surface for weeks. And after the herbicide treatment, the weeds grew back pretty fast. It was disappointing. And they were at the surface again within a month. That didn't work so very well at all. We need something different. We need new data. We need new approaches. So we're looking at this update to the aquatic weed plan for better ideas on how to understand the growth of weeds, what lake properties feed the growth, and what means can be used to control the growth so we can reclaim our waterfront. In my neighborhood, I think all along the private property waterfront want to support and work with Kenmore. The 2017 IAVMP document described, and I quote, "Our waterfront on beautiful Lake Washington is a precious resource that few cities have. We believe the new update to the IAVMP needs to describe just how we can recapture that." Thank you.
Thank you. Victoria Grayland. Vicki Grayland.
Hi, I'm Vicki Grayland, and I live in Kenmore. I support David Morton's testimony, first of all. I think it's very technical, but very important information. I also want to thank the City Council for working together with citizens to honor our veterans. And I want to congratulate Councilmember Karina File for her certificate. I would also like to make a few comments about the Integrated Aquatic Vegetation Management Plan 2020 update. I plan to comment November 19th for the city hearing on the plan. I remember last week when Councilmember O'Kane encouraged us to invest in the environment. And that's what I'd like to say about the budget outlined on this plan. It seems to be saying that herbicides are recommended if budget is a primary factor. And if it's not a factor, then we can use mechanical or hand removal. And I'd like to, of course, recommend not using herbicides. First of all, I don't think that the budget is absolutely correct because it doesn't really talk about the long-term effects of using poisons in our rivers. And it doesn't talk about the cost of those poisons going downstream and the effects of those chemicals in the water. So the budget isn't really accurate in my opinion. Yeah, let's invest in the environment. This is really one of our greatest values here, if not the greatest value, that we can leave to future generations. Let's think long-term and let's think realistically. the previous commenter, Mr. Adamski, said things grew back almost immediately. There's built up resistance to a lot of these chemicals. It's nature's way of dealing with them. So thank you for this time. And I hope to see you all on the 19th.
Thank you. David?
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can.
Great, my name is David Dorian. I'm a resident of Kenmore. First of all, I'd like to thank Council for the proclamation honouring veterans and also to congratulate Councilmember File on her certificate. I'd also like to thank Council in general for all of the engagement over the summer. Those of us who've been inspired to speak up and engage around the issues of diversity, equity and inclusion have really been met and engaged with by Council extremely well, in my opinion. It's been great working with Rob and Chief Moen, Brandon, having many conversations and being open to hearing ideas and also sharing ideas back as well. It's just been great to see that as part of Kenmore and to see the support from Council there as well. So in that light, I did want to speak up and thank Council for considering the diversity, equity and inclusion proposal. I think it's a very important proposal. Obviously, we've seen aspects of the issues with the Mayor's Pledge, where we're seeing people who are experiencing the most injustice, people who are being literally killed because of the colour of their skin. Not necessarily here in Kenmore, but obviously we're seeing it at a national level. So that's where a lot of the focus has been. The plan that is coming in is something that there are many people in Kenmore, I know because I'm working with several of them, who are very passionate about that and making sure that we as a community can make sure that those members of our community who have least can be supported by the community in general. I've been reading a report from King County called The Determinants of Equity. And it actually shows, again, the council's doing a great job overall for all of us as a community, because we score very well, as it were, on a lot of the determinants of equity in ourselves as a community. So if we look at the north end of King County, we're doing really well on things like household income, but even things like access to green space, various different measures, including education and the income inequity within education, we're still doing very well. However, within that, there's still almost 1 in 5 children within the North Shore School District who are experiencing real economic hardship in their homes, and that will extend to families as well. I've seen data, I'm not sure if this is backed up because it's just from an internet search, which suggests that there would be some families in our community coming from a background that in census would be connected to the Hispanic community, who are earning 50% less on average than the white population in Kenmore. So I think it's a really important topic that we engage with. And I'd like to thank Council for continuing to engage with it, and I'll cede the rest of my 12 seconds.
Thank you very much. John Hendrickson. John Hendrickson.
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening, council members. John Hendrickson, Kenmore, Washington. Tonight, I'd like to talk about the accessory dwelling units ordinance that you passed in September. And I've been trying to get some information and having trouble getting it both from council and from staff. And I would like to document the impacts of this new ordinance. Karina File, I've been communicating with for 3.5 months and have been unable to get a clear and informative answer or even a respectful answer to my questions. She said in February 24th of 2020 at a council meeting, she supported more than 2 ADUs per lot. And I simply asked her, how many do you support then? And she gave me an evasive answer saying that ADUs in this ordinance would only apply to a small number of lots, about 105 lots in total in Kenmore. And that was in July. And I told her, I said, look, I gave her a copy of Lori Anderson, our best planner in the city of Kenmore. And she said, just for detached units, it would add 2,904 parcels that could be added to it with this new ordinance. 105 versus 2,904 is a big difference. But she still doesn't clarify and give me a clear and informative answer. So I've requested over 18 times for a legitimate answer and to no avail so far. On Friday, Debbie Bent chimed in, and I gave you guys an email today with her response. And I had cited the neighborhood on 199th and I think 76th that has a very crowded 4,500 square foot lots. And Debbie said that these already could put in ADUs if they met the requirements. But what's the if? And she went on to say that if the previous one stall per ADU requirement were still in place, these homes could satisfy that requirement. But if you go to the old ordinance under Kenmore Chapter 1873-100, it says one additional off-street space shall be provided. So if someone came in, like Debbie Bent says, and doesn't add a new stall, I think if you appeal that and go to the courts, go to the hearing examiner, they're going to rule against them. But this is what Debbie Bent is saying. So, you know, I also asked, now can these new properties be condominiumized? Because I know that, you know, foreign investors are coming down from Vancouver because they have a 15% foreign investment tax up there now. They're down in Seattle. You guys are copying Seattle's ordinance. And they're taking these single family homes, condominiumizing them, adding the separate ADU in the structure, and they can sell them separate. Please answer my email. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to be brief. I'm speaking tonight in regards to the fumes coming out of the asphalt plant. And in so many ways, you can't even see me, can you? I'm sorry.
Would you mind stating your city of residence for the record as well?
Kenmore, Washington.
Thank you.
We also need his last name, I believe.
Lance, Peter Lance.
Okay. Oh, there you are, Peter. Okay.
Yeah, okay. I've met you before. I'm commenting tonight regarding the fumes coming out of the asphalt plant. And this is going to be a little bit random. In so many ways, this feels so third world. We've got a toxic, potentially toxic environment here that the council and the government does not know much about. And I don't know why you're not more curious. To have the experts come on and speak in a 3-minute conversation like David Morton did tonight, and also the people from Cadman in previous conversations, strikes me as a little less than curious that the council, your obligation to us is to provide health and safety for us. And this feels like it is lacking when we're having these conversations in 3-minute intervals by volunteer people coming forward to speak. You guys need to get on your A game here and inquire about what is going on here. This is truly your job. You've got citizens that are complaining about the effects. They may be real, they may be not, but my guess is where there's some smoke, there is some fire. I think this is your time to be curious. I come from a real estate background, and just by a segue, when we have a problem in the real estate industry, and the broker gets whiff of a problem with a transaction where somebody might be harmed, it is that broker's obligation to inquire, to look, to investigate. And I implore the council and the mayor to at least rise to the level of the real estate community and accept their standard. It is now your time to investigate and what is going on, and are these fumes a problem for certain citizens of Kenmore? There's a strong question out here for you folks to answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rose H.
Good evening. My name is Rose Hendricks. I live in Kenmore. I'm calling in to say that I support and I'm very pleased to see the council engaging on the issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion, as noted on the agenda tonight. I did want to note that I would really like a focus put on improving the material conditions of the lives of our marginalized residents rather than a heavy focus on training and continuing education, although those are very important pieces of a DEI plan. The differences in material conditions such as economic condition and educational attainment were explicitly called out in the city manager's budget message. And I just wanted to make a note that I would like that to be a priority. Congratulations to Councilmember File, and I see the remainder of my time.
Thank you. Hillary.
Hi, sorry, turn on my camera. I also wanted to thank the council for their consideration of, oh, can you see me? Oh, here we go. I wanted to thank the council for their consideration of equity and diversity, and I wanted to add my voice to the other individuals who've spoken up here to say that this is really a critical issue at this time, and that I hope support will go to those who are marginalized in our community. I don't need 3 minutes to tell you that. I just want you all to know that I have, oh, and I'm from Kenmore as well. And I want you all to know that I also just would really like to see this move forward, and thank you for putting effort into it.
Hillary,
I don't need any more time.
Would you share your last name with us for the record?
Yes, it's Windish, W-I-N-D-I-S-E.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
C. Donahue. C. Donahue.
Hello. Hi, good evening, Mayor Baker and members of the council. My name is Cindy Donahue. I live in Shoreline. However, the center I manage serves Kenmore residents, and I am the Kirkland North Shore Hope Link Center manager and also a board member for NUSA, North Urban Human Services Alliance. And I very much appreciate this opportunity to speak with you tonight. And thank you for your partnership. Oops, hold on. Thank you for your partnership with HopeLink in providing a package of services to help people stabilize when in crisis and to acquire skills and tools that equip them to exit poverty. With your help, Kirkland HopeLink served 348 households and 745 Kenmore residents this last fiscal year. We are grateful for city staff's recommendation to increase funding to HopeLink in the upcoming years. Please know your support makes a huge difference. With the new flexible financial assistance program that HopeLink launched in the North Shore area this past year, along with our community partnership, we have supported unique family needs and found ways to help a broader client base before their struggles became a crisis. People like Terry, a Kenmore resident who came to the Kirkland HopeLink Center for assistance with rent. Terry was faced with a tough choice of paying rent or replacing the tires on her car. The tires had become a safety issue, and she needed it to get to work each day. She replaced the tires and came to our center for help with rent. We were able to get her rent paid, as well as getting her on both our energy grants for LIHEAP and PSE. When someone like Terry comes to us for help with paying her bills, we can also help her family with food, refer her to our family development program for planning longer-term solutions, and refer her to our employment services for help with job readiness. Our community relies on human service organizations to provide the essential building blocks for social, emotional, physical, and financial well-being, from childcare and youth mentoring to services that help older adults stay in their home. These organizations help people weather life's unpredictable storms and help build the resilience to prepare for the future. We all have a role to play in supporting these services and in creating a just, equitable, and healthy community. Thanks to our partnership with the City of Kenmore, we can support various clients' needs with the goal of helping them achieve stability and to take steps to exit poverty. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see no further hands raised.
Ms. Donahue, I want to thank you and HopeLink for everything that you do in our community. You're a very important part of our community. We're very happy to have HopeLink so involved. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to be heard?
I see 2 further hands raised.
Great.
Elizabeth Mooney. Elizabeth Mooney.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Mooney, and there will be a second hand raised because we share a screen, so Jim Myers will come in after me, please. My name's Elizabeth Mooney. I live in Kenmore. I care deeply about streams and salmon and birds and the health of our environment, the people in Kenmore. As PERC president, I'm happy that we are partnering with our city, and I thank you all on our storm drain stenciling partnership and Streamfest 2020. We're partnering with Snow King Watershed Council, and the good news is the storm drain stenciling glue is coming in this week. So I thank Tracy Bonazinski, who is, and Ashley and Rita that we're working with in this. And contact me if you want to join. It will be beginning, it'll be COVID friendly, so it's, you know, socially distanced. I am also wanting to let you know that one of the fun things that we're going to be doing is having a scavenger hunt. So we'll be connecting, and that's from the love of Kenmore, where John Adamski, I want you to know that you were at our table with Todd from Kenmore Air and other people, and we want to include everybody, even though it's COVID world right now. So whether we're eating or going to the breweries or biking or walking or putting the stencils down or learning about the kokanee that could come to our small streams in the future, let's all do it and think about the health of our environment. And that's air, streams. One thing that might be fun to talk about are these issues that, like Mr. Adamski was bringing up, and we can have those discussions with Zoom. I want to fully support what David Morton said, Vicki Grayland, and Peter Lance. You all are our council members, and we look to you to protect our public health and safety. And what I've learned that I want to talk about is what's good for the salmon is good for us. What's good for the birds and the trees is good for us. So whatever we do to protect our air and know what's in it, whatever we do to protect our water and what's in it, let's reach out perhaps to some of the other agencies, not excluding Department of Health, Department of Ecology, the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency, and we can get them to perhaps speak during our Zoom Streamfest 2020 to educate the community about the issues that have to do with our healthy environment and economy. Thank you. And yeah, I'll raise my hand again for Jim Myers.
Okay, Mr. Myers.
I don't know how to do it.
Oh. Hi. Good evening. My name is Jim Myers. I've been a resident of Kenmore for 25 years now. I'm also a member of the Kenmore Clean Air Coalition, and like the city of Kenmore, we have been working to ensure that the air we breathe does not pose a health hazard. Last week, we heard from Dr. Benedict Zinn, who was representing Cadman, and he told us that their corporate goal was to be a good neighbor, and they wish to engage the city and its citizens in an open dialogue. The Kenmore Clean Air Coalition is encouraged by Dr. Zinn's invitation, and we hope to be able to discuss our concerns with Cadman in the near future. We also hope that the city will be transparent with its citizens regarding its discussions with Cadman. This is clearly a case where the saying trust but verify is appropriate, and we encourage the city to work towards ensuring that the operations at the Cadman asphalt plant do not in any way put its citizens' health, or our environment at risk. Thank you.
Thank you. N. Hansen. N. Hansen. N. Hansen.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I forgot to sign up, so I'm last again. And there were several people talking about the aquatic weed program, or the integrated pest management program having to do with aquatic weeds. I have talked with the people at King County Noxious Weeds, and they are willing to come out and talk to us. The director of the program said he would, it's probably best if he comes out and does an overview first, and then we could work with a specialist, one of their specialists, and they've got, you know, all kinds, and they have ways to treat some of the knotweed where they would inject into the stem, and it might be toxic somewhat, but I don't know, and we might want to find out. So if you're interested in that, I can provide that information. So they might be scheduled for one of our meetings, or one of the council meetings. And then the other thing I really wanted to say was that I was very concerned when I heard that our taxes would be increased. Our property taxes would be increased. And I guess if it keeps going like this, it means that I'm not in the house that I'm in, because I can't keep doing this. And we pay, isn't it close to 50% now for schools? And I thought that was going to be the end of those, you know, extra taxes like that for quite a while after we voted for the schools. So I don't see how we can keep doing this. Anyway, I also want to say that I have a house that's probably worth 1/5 of a cousin in Magnolia, excuse me, in Magnolia, and her taxes are only $2,000 more than mine. So that says something to me. I don't know exactly what the precise details would be, but that's really not appropriate for the community that we live in compared with Magnolia. So let's see, what else? I guess I've also talked to several people and met several people moving out because of the taxes that keep going up. And I guess on a retirement income that only increases, you know, 2 to possibly 3% per year, it's just not going to work. So I just wanted to let you know that. And that's all I have tonight. Thanks.
Thanks. Ms. Hansen, would you kindly state your full name and city of residence for us?
Nancy Hansen, Hansen, Kenmore.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
I see no further hands raised.
Anybody else wishing to be heard? Anybody else wishing to be heard? If not, I will declare the public comment period closed. Next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda stands approved unanimously. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing. And this is on the preliminary budget. And this is public preliminary 2021-2022 budget. The city manager budget message and summary of all funds budgets 21 and 22. Ms. Gregory, are you here to speak to this?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I can.
Perfect. Great. Thank you very much, Mayor, council members. Yes, tonight I have a presentation for your information and for the information of the public. This is our first public hearing on the budget, and I'm going to begin by sharing my screen and see if I can figure out how to do it correctly this time. I can't seem to get back to there's the share screen button. And I hope that you can see now the title page. This is the 2021-2022 proposed biennial budget public hearing, November 9th, tonight.
Yes, indeed.
See this big purple screen? Okay, great. Then I will go through this, and I'll go through the presentation. I'm going to walk through the budget at a high level for the public's information, and then at the end I will close my comments and we can take public comment if you wish. Sorry, I'm having a little difficulty getting things oriented here on my end. So tonight's session is set up for the purpose of receiving public testimony on the 2021-2022 proposed biennial budget, and to review the proposed 0.6% tax levy increase and the impact on a property owner in the city. After tonight, we will have our final public hearing on the budget next Monday night, in anticipation of November 23rd, when we have several actions on the agenda. First, the budget amendments to close the 2019-2020 budget period, to adopt the 2021 property tax levy, to adopt the 2021 excess tax levy for the walkways and waterways bonds, and finally to adopt the 2021-2022 biennial budget. Briefly, when we have prepared the budget this year, we try to follow these various policy directions, and from biennium to biennium they may be a bit different, but they always we always try to present a budget that supports and implements the City Council's goals, and also to consider the work and the results of the priority-based budgeting that we have performed earlier in the biennium. We prepare a balanced budget that utilizes a very conservative approach to both revenues and expenditures. This biennium, we've attempted to present a budget that maintains many of the discretionary reductions in expenditures that we took as a result of the pandemic earlier this year. And we took into consideration that we should not expect financial operations, revenues, or expenditures to return to normal before 2022. There have been a number of significant changes since the last biennium. At least these are the ones that stick out in my view. 2 years ago, we were planning our public works operation, and now we are looking back over 2 full years of public works being fully operational as far as staff and equipment is concerned, even though a site is still to be determined. This will be the year that we'll transition away from city oversight of the Kenmore Business Incubator, a very successful startup economic development strategy. In this new biennium, we expect to issue our second series, $10 million of walkways and waterways bonds, and the budget includes a provision for tax levy and debt service for those bonds. Climate action plan is to be implemented in this biennium with program planning and staffing to support that. The new budget includes a human resources manager who will also oversee diversity, inclusion, and equity program. And then, of course, the biggest change since the last biennium is the occurrence of the pandemic, resulting in loss of revenues and unbudgeted expenses. There are two components to the 2021-2022 biennial budget. In fact, any budget that the city prepares, and I like to go over these so that folks understand that there is a difference between our operating revenues and expenditures and our capital revenues and expenditures. So our operating revenues and expenditures include the funds, the general and street funds, other special revenue funds such as the Transportation Benefit District, Public Art Fund, debt service funds that provide for servicing the debt on the bonds, and enterprise and internal service funds such as the Surface Water Fund, which is an enterprise fund, and the Equipment Replacement Fund, which is an internal service fund. And then there's a capital component to the budget, which are the expenditures and the resources that fund those capital projects, such as the CIP, which was adopted in October for transportation, parks, surface water, and facilities, and funded by transportation and park impact fees, surface water fees, real estate excise tax, and bonds. First, we'll take a look at the general operating revenues and expenditures. And the most significant revenue source in the operating funds is the property tax. For the biennium, property taxes are the budgeted revenue of $10.8 million. This represents 40% of the total budgeted revenues for the general fund. Includes $90,000 in new taxes from construction. It's the single largest ongoing revenue source. And compared to our 2019-2020 budget, it's a 6% increase. Most of that increase coming from the new construction taxes. And with the levy increase that is proposed for 2021 of 0.6%, this would generate $31,920 and result in a tax rate of about $1.02 rounded up. Compared to last year, the tax rate was closer to $1. And then the budget includes a 1% levy increase in 2022, which you won't adopt this year. You'll deliberate on that next year. That would generate a $53,000 income. So giving an overview of property taxes, levy, and assessed value. So as proposed, the 2021 regular property tax levy is $5,383,000 with the 0.6% increase. This is a 1.45% increase over last year's levy of 5.3. And the increase includes $31,920 from that levy increase of 0.6% and $45,000 from new construction. So we've received a preliminary assessed value for the city of $5,293 million, which is actually a slight decrease, $65 million from last year. When the assessed valuation declines, the tax rates tend to go up, just based on the way that the levy rates are computed. So I have yet to be really educated as to why our AV went down. The assessor is working on that with me, but in fact it is slightly down, so the rate is slightly up. And utilizing that lower assessed valuation with the levy that's proposed of 5.383, we have an expected tax rate of $1.017 per $1,000 of assessed valuation. Looking at how this would impact a homeowner, I've provided an example here. If you had a $700,000 home in Kenmore, I understand that the example I used during the other public hearing of $600,000 might have been a little bit too low. The 2020 median value for a home in the city of Kenmore is actually $638,000 per King County assessor. So using a $700,000 property, it would have been taxed at the 2020 rate of 1.003, meaning taxes for the city city's portion of about $702. If that home value did not change in 2021 and the tax rate went up a bit to 1.017, this would result in about $10 more annually for that homeowner. The levy rate being slightly higher than it was last year. If the home value increased 5%, let's say, to $735,000 and taxed at the 2021 rate, which is a little bit higher than it was last year, the taxes would be about $747 or $45 more than was paid last year. So I want to make this clear that because of the little bit of increase in the rate, the impact on the homeowner is a little bit more than we have been experiencing. When assessed valuations are climbing, the rate tends to drop and drop and drop, but that's not the case this year. This chart shows how property taxes for a typical homeowner in the city of Kenmore are composed. There are 12 different taxing districts that impact Kenmore residents, and you can see them here. Not all 12, some are summarized for the sake of keeping the chart more simple than not, but schools make up a large impact of the tax pie. And the total rate last year, or this year I should say, for 2020 was $11.05 per $1,000 of assessed valuation. So on a median valued home in Kenmore of $638,000, the tax bill for a homeowner would be about $7,048. And you can see that the Kenmore portion down here is really only 10% of this total tax pie. On this chart, I just want to point out the relationship between assessed valuation and tax rates. And you can see that over time, as assessed valuation has risen and then dropped during the prior recession and then risen dramatically these last several years, the tax rate has declined. But now we're at a point where it has flattened, so the tax rate is not dropping at this point in time. In fact, it is going up a couple of cents. The other thing that impacts the assessed valuation is new construction coming on the tax roll. And this last bar is 2021's assessed valuation, new construction going on the tax roll. And you can see that it's lower than it has been for 5 or 6 years. So again, that impacts assessed value, and it's not as high as it has been in the past. This chart shows the makeup of the general fund revenues and the significance that property tax has to the revenue picture, and sales tax being the next largest portion of the revenues, utility tax, etc. These are 4 of the major components of sales tax. It's the second largest component of our revenues for the general fund. And it's not a very exciting picture because the revenues are fairly flat, especially depressed by the pandemic that we've been experiencing. Utility tax is the next largest segment of our revenue picture. These are the 3 major components of utility tax: electric, gas, and telephone cell. The blue line, of course, being the electric, and it rises slowly over time, as does gas, but cell phone and telephone utility tax revenues continue to decline. The street fund has 3 dedicated revenue sources: fuel tax, water sewer franchise fees that come in from the general fund, and up to this point in time, transportation benefit district fees. This graph shows how those have behaved over the last few years, with the green line being the implementation of the water sewer franchise fee, and it continues to grow at a reasonable pace. Transportation benefit district revenues were growing slowly, but have fallen off as we have anticipated that there will be no revenues over the next 2 years. And this was developed at the time the initiative passed. So we'll just kind of wait and see how this turns out, and then maybe those revenues will come back. Fuel tax is the other major revenue source for the street fund, and it has grown slowly but steadily over time until the pandemic hit, and then it dropped off in 2020, but will be expected to slowly come back up. And we have started to see a slight increase just lately in the last couple of months. Other major operating revenues for the general fund are listed here. And as I said, gas tax revenue is a huge resource for the street fund, although it's down about 7% from last year. We did not budget any TBD or transportation benefit district revenues. And surface water charges I've shown here are $5 million over the biennium. And of course, they're dedicated and restricted to the surface water activities. This chart shows some of the significant cost drivers. And remember, these are 2-year totals, but these are where most of the funds go, from salaries and benefits to insurance and utilities and human services contributions, including ARCH. And these are really relatively non-discretionary and represent 72% of our total biennial budget, which is just over $30 million when you combine the general and the street fund. There are few, but a couple new positions in this coming budget. And one of those is a human resources manager that has been included in the budget, as well as the half FTE for development services administrative assistant. In the surface water fund, we have included a budget for a half FTE administrative assistant. And in that same position, half of the FTE would be responsible for climate action plan staff support. Salary ranges included in the budget are budgeted to increase 1% each year, and benefits were budgeted to increase 5%, although we now expect that they will actually be 4%. Switching over to the capital part of the budget, this pie chart shows where our capital costs are expected to be spent this coming biennium, with transportation consuming 3/4 of the entire capital budget, just over $50 million, which is not a surprise considering we have the Sammamish Bridge and the walkways and waterways projects. Resources for those capital projects are shown here. Everything from grants to city funds, impact fees, REIT, walkways and waterways bonds. A significant portion of the funding for the capital projects in this biennium are city dollars, with grants almost making up 50% of the funding source. There are 8 capital projects, park capital projects budgeted in this biennium for a total of $8.3 million, and they are listed here. And these were reviewed in detail during the departmental presentations, as well as during the CIP in October. There are 13 transportation projects, and I apologize for that odd transition, but there are 13 transportation projects that make up the $50 million, almost $51 million of capital expenditures, and 6 surface water projects for about $3.9 million in this coming biennium. One of these isn't exactly a project. The swim components of transportation projects are $664,000, which is a contribution of the surface water fees towards the swim component of transportation projects. We still have a city facility capital project set up to provide for a public workshop, land acquisition, development. We don't have anything in our scope yet, but we have money budgeted in this capital fund should we settle on a site. So there are some consultant acquisition costs budgeted here as well for a total of $3.6 million. And overall, this is the total proposed city budget, all funds listed here, total $132 million over the biennium. And with that, that concludes my comments for this portion of the public hearing on the proposed preliminary budget. I'd be happy to take questions, listen to comments. I want the public to know that there are copies of the budget available for review at City Hall, although I know it's difficult to come into City Hall, but we also have it posted on our website at www.cityofkenmore.com. That concludes my comments, Mayor. Are there any questions?
Questions? Questions? I'm not seeing any questions.
Well, perhaps this would then be a good time to open the public hearing for comments.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember File's hand was up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember File, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hairbig, and thank you, Mayor Baker. You know, I am looking at this budget, how I would really wish we could be allocating the majority of that fund towards our human services versus jail and court. So I know that this is a well put together budget. I just wish our priorities were shifted a little bit differently in these two areas. And I know that we have a focus of trying to better serve our community and pathways of reducing jail and court time. But here we have the COVID pandemic, and the outlook is a higher need for human services. So I think we're going to have to be creative over time in the coming year. So thank you for your hard work on this. I appreciate it.
Anybody else? Yes, Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you. Does the legal services then include all of the city's legal services, or was that 525 just limited to the courts?
No, the legal services is actually all city attorney cost. The court and the jail are part of the public safety budget. And in fact, those two budgets are significantly less this biennium than they had been in the prior biennium. One, due to our chief's negotiations with SCORE to reduce our dedicated bed rates, and based on, you know, I guess our experience that is lower than had been expected in prior bienniums. So we were able to really reduce those budgets, which freed up dollars for other programs. But in answer to your question, Councilmember Marshall, legal is legal. It's city attorney and other attorneys and legal consultation that we need over time for code enforcement or things like that.
Can I jump in real quick? And Joanne, can you tell us where prosecutor is budgeted?
Prosecutor is budgeted in the public safety as well. It's not part of the legal costs. I didn't call it out because it wasn't, you know, one of the top line items like jail would be, but it's in the public safety budget along with the jail contract and the police contract.
And public defender as well, right?
Under all of that, yes. Yep. Public defense, screening, public defender services, etc.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, I'll declare the public hearing open for the 21-22 budget and summary of the all funds budgets for 21 and 22. Clerk, please call the first person.
John Hendrickson. John Hendrickson.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much, John Hendrickson, Kenmore, Washington. So just look at that presentation. I mean, you can't see the forest for the trees. So much detail here and there, when all you have is really 7 items of revenue of significance for your operating budget, and the bottom one is only like 200,000 a year. You could just list these revenues out, list out your expenses, salaries, and then by department. Anyone could understand what's going on. So why do it this way? So no one can understand the big picture. So I think I like to speak to the 3 fundamental foundational economic realities that are being ignored through this budget process and this financial sustainability task force process. And they're all laid out in Kenmore's original financial analysis that citizens were provided to vote on when we became a city back in '98. And each of the council and all the task force members were all provided a copy of this original feasibility study. It's the most objective financial analysis you can get. One, it says right up front, we're a small city with very limited revenue. Our property tax base is 85% residential, 15% commercial. That's why we have so little sales tax. The executive summary in that original report gave 4 issues that you need to emphasize on it, whether you're financially feasible. First was revenue, second was expenses that were laid out. The last 2 were that you have to control employee costs. You have to limit it to around 13 to 15 people, which we did for quite a number of years. And so 2 out of the 4 is where they emphasized that. Then in the summary, they re-emphasized it again, saying it does not appear the city would have such a degree of revenue that it could afford increased municipal services. I think I know we have over 50 people, we might be over 60 people now. And you guys, you just have the pedal to the metal and don't seem to care. Similar to how you handled the St. Ed's ball field issue, you went pedal to the metal on that. And I think we lost 450 to 500,000 in that wasted process. The task force has ignored this critical issue as well. The second issue was the road tax. It's laid out on page 25. The city council especially has ignored that from day one. I think you've all heard the audio from the council member Hensel, which read right out of page 25 and said there is no road tax, and he omitted the key language that said the road tax was replaced by the property tax and a small amount of utility tax. An obscene lying by omission, but the council supported it, especially Dave Baker and Milton Curtis, and the rest are followers and don't stand up for what's right. So on page 25. Finally, on page 159, the feasibility study said, well, here's your numbers. You're going to have this big surplus. You handed it out. These are the financials you gave to the public to vote on. And back on page 59, they said, oh, but in the small print, by the way, you can't rely on sales tax equalization. They said it's predictable that revenue from this source will diminish over time. And from the beginning, the city should have a strategy to replace it. It was 23% of our revenue. If they told the truth about that, in '97, no one would have voted to become a city. And you're still living that lie. And you're lying. I'm sorry to use the word lying. In court, I think they used a material misstatement, a misstatement of material fact. But when you do it over and over and over, at some point you got to start calling it systemic lying. So, to summarize, that is really, these are ethical issues. You can't afford the staffing level that you have. Your presentation isn't even clear for anyone to understand. It's actually very easy to do. You're only responsible for police safety, road safety, building code safety, plus surface water management. We've paid over $100 million in road tax and you guys refuse to admit it. I don't know why any public servant would want to continue living with these foundational lies, but that you continue to operate with. Please change.
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. Your time has expired. Stacy. Stacy.
Hi again, Stacy Valenzuela from Kenmore. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Again, I would like to stress, we need the city to trim the budget, freeze adding expenses, including holding back from hiring, just freeze it all together, stop using consultants, and stop increasing any taxes of our residents. This includes property, utilities, sales tax, before we have too many people ending up on the street, especially those that are on a fixed income and others that will be out of work from this pandemic. It's real simple. The city needs to cut back on salaries now. Kenmore hired extra staff late 2018, early 2019. I saw a lot of new faces. I worked with a lot of them in volunteering. Why now they need to hire several more people for half positions that'll end up being full positions that'll just increase the salary? You have a lot of people working there, and there is no reason why a person cannot take on half a job or they are not working to their full potential. There is no reason why people need to be paid those salaries and they can't do a little bit of consulting or put together a report. These are just normal things that happen in businesses all the time. People need to suck it up and people need to do a harder job. And I think that in the conditions that we are at, it's time to make big sacrifices at the city level. We need Kenmore to do better. We need Kenmore to show people how they can make the sacrifices that are needed during a pandemic for the better and good of our whole community. I hope you please redo this budget and get those salaries down. Do not hire anymore. I know it's a hard thing because we were doing so well before the pandemic that you could hire, but things have changed and we don't see an end in sight. So please, for our love of Kenmore, take this into consideration and listen, because you're not listening now when you're still hiring and still pushing this kind of increase in taxes during a pandemic. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Finley.
My name is Phyllis Finley. I live in Kenmore. In listening to the various department budget reports over the past several weeks, I was surprised that every single city department, rather than being required to reduce spending, seems to be allowed to increase their budgets by various percentages. Department leaders had only to state why they need a budget increase, and it seems as though the council nods its collective head and lets it proceed. I actually had looked forward to hearing, and I assumed that during a pandemic, during a budget crisis, every department would have reported how they were cutting expenses, not rationalizing why their budgets were increasing. It's not unreasonable to expect, with some effort, that there are opportunities in every department to reduce expenses. An alternative approach would have been for the council to require a reduction in each department and let departments discern how to accomplish that. If I'm understanding Ms. Gregory's presentation tonight correctly, $32,000 roughly will be gained from a property tax increase. In a city our size, really, you can't find $32,000 of expenses to cut? Just a reminder that as recently as February, 3 of these council members thought that we could spend $300,000 more on a St. Ed study. If budget decisions are based on priority-based budgeting, then maybe during the budget crisis, pandemic or not, it's time to reconsider priorities. That would not be an unreasonable decision. Please consider cutting expenses, including staff, a hiring freeze, before raising taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no further hands raised.
Anybody else wishing to speak? Anybody else wishing to speak on the budget?
Miss Elizabeth Mooney. Elizabeth Mooney.
Hi, thank you. I'm Elizabeth Mooney, resident of Kenmore for 26 years, president of PERC, People for Environmentally Responsible Kenmore. And I've mentioned this before to you all at this council and previous councils. I've heard it from one of our Kenmore residents and former treasurer of PERC, Richard Wayman, and other citizens. You have got so many qualified people in this community that have offered to volunteer. And if you could stop using so many consultants and start using the intellect and the creativity of people who don't need to get paid because they are putting their heart and soul and love into our community, with our community, that would feel a lot better than raising our taxes. I know I want to invite the environment to be protected, and I wanted our sidewalks to be protected, but I had to vote for a whole bunch of money being spent in parks because it all got coupled together. I didn't want to do that, but was I going to take away from sidewalks where some of our friends' children died? I couldn't. So I know now that's all fixed, but I don't think that's right, especially with the pandemic. You know, I don't want to take away from our good staff. We need your leadership, but I would like to take away from some of the frill that we don't need as much as we need for our public health and safety. That's the most important thing right now. I am offering to help. Our volunteers in PERC are offering to help. Snow King Watershed Council is offering to help. There's a way to trim the budget that doesn't mean taking away from the hard work that's there. So use your creativity, go fight, win, unite. Thank you. Get your sleep.
Thank you. No further hands at this time.
Anybody else wishing to be heard? Anybody else? I declare the public hearing closed on the preliminary 21 and 22 budget and the summary of all funds budgets 21 and 22. Next item on the agenda, 2019-2020 budget amendments. Ms. Gregory.
Hello again, Council, Mr. Mayor. So you may remember that before we close any budget period, we need to review all fund budgets to make sure that funds are not going to exceed their appropriations. We need to consider actions taken by the City Council since the last budget amendment that ought to be incorporated into the budget. Consider any significant unappropriated expenditures, etc. So we approved this 2019-2020 budget 2 years ago on November 19th. We amended it for the first time during the mid-biennium review on November 25th, 2019, and now it's time to amend it before we close the books on it. There are only a few suggested amendments to review tonight, and they include the funds of the General Fund, the Public Art Fund, Parks Capital Fund, Transportation Capital Fund, and the Strategic Opportunities Fund. And I will review those amendments now by sharing my screen and pulling up the worksheet that was in the packet. So I hope that you all see a page titled 2019-2020 Schedule of 2020 Year-End Recommended Budget Adjustments. The first group of adjustments is for the general fund. And in the general fund, there are just a few items that I'd like to incorporate into the budget I think would be appropriate to recognize. When we built the budget in 2018, we were still in negotiations and working with on a Lake Point project, and expected reimbursements for that project of $500,000. Early in the biennium, that activity ceased, and we only received $100,762, and so I am recommending that we reduce the budget to that amount. As a result of the pandemic, we were awarded 2 buckets of CARES CRF funds, and I want to recognize those revenues and then again the expenditures that go with them in this budget. From King County, we were awarded $35,615 of coronavirus relief funds, which we have already received, and we were allotted $1,049,000 of coronavirus relief funds through the State Commerce Department. So those are 2 additional adjustments to revenue that I am recommending we recognize in our budget document. And then in association with that, of course, we've had and anticipate before the end of the period, $1,084,000 worth of expenditures, which is the sum total of these 2 for technology, personal protective supplies, small business grants and support, human services grants, payroll, etc., a myriad of expenditures that were not budgeted but related to the pandemic. So for the general fund, the net adjustment to the bottom line would be the reduction in this one revenue item of $399,238. The next recommended adjustment is to the Public Art Fund. And I believe late last year and earlier this year, the council discussed funding for the art components of the walkways and waterways projects, and determined that Rhododendron Park, Squires Landing, and Log Boom Park would contribute money for the 1% for Art program of $69,000, and that the one transportation walkway and waterways project, 68th Avenue, would contribute money towards this as well. So this budget amendment recognizes those funds transferring money to the Public Art Fund to be used in the next biennium where it is budgeted for art in the park projects. Let's see if I get this right on the screen. So in the Park Capital Fund, this is down here in the expenditure area, is the offset to the public art component item that I just mentioned. So this is where it comes out of the Park Capital Fund, and you just saw where it comes into the art fund. The other item affecting the Park Capital Fund has to do with the Rhododendron Park Boathouse project, which is nearing completion and was budgeted to be funded with contributions from the North Shore School District and a private foundation fundraising effort. Those have not occurred at this time due to the pandemic primarily. So in order to complete the funding for the project at this time, we are going to borrow $660,000 from the Strategic Opportunities Fund to shore up that project. And then the budget includes a repayment schedule that we hope will come to fruition in a year or two down the road when the economy and the community comes back to normal, and perhaps the North Shore School District contribution will come in and the private foundation fundraising efforts will come in. But for the time being, this shows $660,000 coming in from Strategic Opportunities to support that Rhododendron Park Boathouse project. In the Transportation Capital Fund, we have these first three items all go together. There were two new transportation projects that are included in the CIP for 2021 going forward, but were actually started in 2020. And they are the T48, T49, these local road safety projects that were funded with highway safety improvement grants. So because we had not provided for a budget in 2020, this is what we're doing now to recognize that there will be some expenses in this current year before we close the books. So $380,000 is expected to support those two projects from the Highway Safety Improvement Program grant. And these are the expenditures expected for those two projects on the expenditure side. And again, here is the $65,000 contribution from the 68th Avenue Walkways and Waterways project to the art fund that we saw previously. And finally, the Strategic Opportunities Fund. The entry in this fund is the offset to the Rhododendron Park Boathouse project revenue that we saw in the Park Capital Fund. So this is just the other side of the entry to provide for a transfer of those funds to Park Capital to be repaid in future years. So these are the sum total of the budget amendments that are recommended for 2019-2020. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. And if you approve and give me direction, we will bring back a budget amendment on November 23rd to put these in place for our current budget. Thank you.
Questions? Yes, Councilmember Curtis.
So I'm having a hard time understanding the Lake Point reimbursements. So it feels to me like we didn't need to spend $400,000, so that's why we never got them reimbursed. So it feels like there should be a wash. So we're counting half of it, the part we never got, but I don't see that we're saying, well, we saved $400,000 that we didn't spend. Does that make sense?
Well, it does make sense. It does make sense. Because
you don't spend it, you don't have to get it reimbursed, but we're counting the reimbursement, but we didn't count that we saved the expense.
You're right. I'm looking back at the mid-biennium expended adjustments that we did, and we could have reduced the expense at that time. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And if you'd like me to incorporate that, I'd be happy to.
That would work for me.
Any other questions? Any other questions? I am not seeing any questions. All right.
Did the clerk stop sharing my screen?
No, the clerk is still sharing your screen.
Okay. Now she's not.
Now she stopped.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Well, with that suggestion, I will add an expenditure reduction in the development services budget to correspond with the reduction in the Lake Point expense reimbursement line item and bring that back as a budget amendment on November 23rd. Totally.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program proposal. City Manager.
Thank you, Your Honor. City Council, good to be here tonight. Good to see all of you. How you doing so far?
Fine.
Not too sleepy yet, right? Tonight's kind of an important night. Well, not kind of, it is. Not just for budget reasons, but for this topic as well. The Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion initiative that we're going to get going on under your direction, and talked about this quite a bit when I went over the budget message with you on October 12th. But even going back to September 14th, you, the City Council, adopted Resolution 20-348, approving a framework to develop and implement policies that foster and create a safe, inclusive, and welcoming community through continued actions that improve diversity, equity, and inclusion. So in other words, you told us to come back to you with a design for a process that would develop a diversity, equity, and inclusion program and policies. And you told us to come back on November 9th. And lo and behold, it is November 9th. And we've been working with our Adam Nebenzal, our graduate intern, has been working on this, as well as Debbie Bent. And we've also retained the services of a firm called The Root of Us to also give us some guidance in the development of this plan for a plan. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Adam to kind of go over the details of this process design. Adam, take it away.
Thanks, Rob. Good evening, City Council. So I'm going to break this up into two separate directions. The first one is going to be the track in which we develop the policy and program timeline. The second track will be regarding the training. To break down the reasons for going in these two tracks, we felt that it was important to begin our framework of developing a process in which we will planning to reach out, that City of Kenmore is planning to reach out to the community, working with a task force, as well as a consultant and an HR manager to reach out to the community, as well as a training to begin the process of understanding the situations of diversity, equity, and inclusion, the current systemic problems that exist in our country, as well as understand the history of Kenmore and kind of learn to take into account our own history and accept the situations there are and how can we learn to improve it. We hope to do this with city managers, with staff, and hopefully the City Council, if you are all able to attend these trainings. So with that in mind, I'm just going to share my screen and kind of lay out the timeline that was presented on the document. So you should all be able to see my screen. So we are currently here in the November-December timeline. We have proposed $150,000 over 2 years going to services regarding DEI policy and training. 100,000 of which will go towards this specific developing a DEI policy program and timeline. So beginning with the recruitment process and hiring a human resources manager from December 2020 to April 2021, where the HR manager will be responsible for managing DEI policy development, including managing the consultant contract, plan implementation, training, and staff support to an appointed DEI task force. From there, we will create a request for proposal process and hiring a consultant, which will happen between December 2020 and April 2021 as well. We're hoping to begin creating the RFP during the process of also hiring an HR consultant. When the HR consultant is brought on, they will also have significant say in determining of who the consultant is that we plan to bring on for developing this DEI program and kind of leading the task force, similarly to what we saw when we had our consultant come in discussing the budget and having that commission with them. So the consultant scope of work would include leading a community engagement process, working with the task force, and developing recommendations for DEI policies and programs. The application process and the appointment of the DEI task force will occur during February 2021 to April 2021, where we are recommending a 7-member task force be appointed by the City Council. The task force, with the help of the consultant and staff, will engage the community in developing recommendations to council for a DEI policy. So we will receive applications, and it will be up to the City Council yourselves to help appoint this task force. Following that, the DEI policy development will occur from April 2021 to December 2021. This phase includes the staff, a consultant, and the task force working together on a community engagement, holding task force meetings, and developing recommendations for council consideration. The council, the task force and the consultant will work really hard to not just talk to all members of the community, but we really want to emphasize reaching out to the most marginalized members of our community to really get them to feel comfortable in being able to come out and feel like they are being heard and want to discuss what is going on in their community. And then in 2022, taking action steps for implementation following adoption of the DEI policy. Following the task force and the consultant performing these community engagement, we hope to have the consultant and the task force present their recommendations to the city, which can include also things that the government should do, or the municipality of what the city of Kenmore should do. And then hopefully within 2022, we lay out a framework in that time of saying what exactly moving forward will the city do to enact the recommendations that were presented. Moving on to track 2, which is the city staff timeline regarding training. So staff and council training has already begun between now and the end of the year. The Root of Us is providing online racial equity training, exploring Kenmore's history and identity. We are proposing in the budget of putting $30,000, my apologies, $20,000 in 2021 and $30,000 in 2022 towards training specific. Formation of a staff DEI committee, we are also requesting between January 2021 and March 2021. Representative from each department will form a committee led by the human resources manager. The committee will be responsible for developing a training schedule for staff for 2021. And there are many online free training resources available. Following the formation, coinciding of the formation of the DEI staff committee, they are requesting that staff also do self-directed training with a lot of these free training sources online available. During the period between this training and hiring the HR manager, staff will be requested to participate in a self-directed training such as the 21-day challenge to prevent a gap in anti-racist education. A lot of concerns that we received from other cities and what they've gone through, as well as what the consultant recommended to us, is not to prevent or allow that huge gap in between the Root of Us performing their training and then the HR manager coming in. Consistency is key, and allowing that education to continuing education, the consultant found to be very important. Following that, we are proposing staff council training, April 2021 to December 2021. The human resource manager will develop and manage a training schedule and consultant contract for training as needed. So we're proposing an anti-bias training occurring in April and October, as well as a racial equity training occurring in July. The racial equity training will be will occur for the city council and the management team, and the anti-bias training will occur for the city council, management team, and staff. We are hoping that having these, allowing these trainings to happen over a period of time and possibly in the future be reoccurring that would help solidify and continue education throughout and increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion management capacity. And then finally, is something a little bit more voluntary and to help continue the conversation of diversity, equity, and inclusion and being more inclusive community. We are proposing DEI like lunch socials. Our current city staff already have consistent lunch socials that are themed around different things. And so we're proposing an elective once-a-month dialogue about the issues of DEI locally, regionally, and nationally. These lunch socials will be facilitated by interested staff members and can discuss a variety of topics ranging from equity-related articles and books to educational exercises and discussion to watching videos like the Institute for Democratic Education and Culture Speak Out video series. So what we are trying to do here in these trainings is start our implementation and our education so that we can better implement the DEI policy and programs. And we are hoping to do that through funding through the city, but also finding other ways through free education, as well as just consistent dialogue to help increase the capacity that the city has for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Questions, Councilmember Curtis?
Could we go back to the first track one?
Absolutely.
So I have just a minor suggestion, and it's so obvious, maybe that's why it wasn't considered, but where it says presentation of city council findings and recommendations, I'd recommend adding a line right above that, something like update city council and get feedback or something like that, and maybe have 2 or 3 touch bases somewhere out there whenever important things are happening. And I know you would have done that already, but I think it's so important it needs to be on this graph as well.
Yeah, it's probably very important to specify it. Thank you, council member.
Questions? Any other questions? Councilmember File.
Well, I have a comment and then a question. So this seems to look like a very good pre-seed, proceed model. And so I'm really happy to see that. Really important process to go through as you implement models and to get programs working within your community and coordinating that with government. So normally with DEI work framework, you see race work as it precedes into culture. And I'm seeing a lot of the framework around race, which is where you start, but have there been discussions on what would that look like if we continue on to do that work with culture, the next step? It's important that we have that discussion and that knowledge of how race and culture intersect with our community and understanding intersectionality and forming of a warm, accepting, affirming community together with our community partners and stakeholders.
So to answer that question, I agree we have definitely focused around, centralize this more around the race issue. However, I feel like once the task force and the consultant begin their discussions, I think culture will obviously become a part of that discussion. And I find it highly likely that when the recommendations are proposed, things that are based around culture and not just race will be included. Because it's not always just about race as well. There's LGBTQ, and other things like gender, sexuality. Those are also things, and those also go into the diversity, equity, and inclusion focus. And so I think that once you begin talking with those people and you understand the most marginalized communities, it doesn't just fall into the race category. It does fall into those that have different culture, that have different creeds, that are all made up of different aspects of their life. So I definitely see that it won't just be around race.
I agree with that. And when we select that consultant, I think the consultant's understanding of intersectionality will be a big piece of the selection process.
Any other questions or comments? Any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any. All right. Is there anything more on this? We're getting a split screen there. We go better. All right. Any more to be said?
I think we're seeking approval, aren't we? Yes.
All right. So,
I'd like to make a motion that we approve this item.
so we have a motion to approve the general direction that we're
Yes.
looking for. The general direction and scope. I'm looking for some nod of head from staff here. Is that what staff is looking for?
Yeah, as outlined in the agenda bill.
Yeah, fine.
I think
All right.
Councilmember O'Kane seconded it. Did I hear that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So will the clerk please take the roll?
Mayor Baker,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis,
Yes.
Councilmember File,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right.
Hey, Your Honor, before we leave this item, as far as the city council training goes, we're looking for a 3-hour block of time for the root of us to provide training for you. I was talking to a couple of you last week, and it was suggested that 3-hour block of time be incorporated into the retreat agenda. Now, I could only say that would work if there weren't a lot of new initiatives and everything brought up during the retreat. If you feel like, you know, you've set the path and pretty much everything you want to get done is captured in this budget process, and there won't be a lot of new things brought up at the retreat, then it might be possible for you to fit this training in your retreat. So what I'm saying is I'm okay with that caveat of, if you have a lot of new ideas and things you want to discuss at the retreat, then probably won't have time to fit in a 3-hour block of training. Otherwise, you might.
Any comments? Is that agreeable with everybody? I'm seeing a lot of yes, there will be no new stuff brought in. We will continue to revise our goals. And
Councilmember Skrubnik had her hand up.
Couple comments. Yeah.
was that comment or an agreement? I'm confused by the hands here. If you're wanting to ask questions, Councilmember Shrubnik and then Deputy Mayor.
Sure, thanks. I think that's, I mean, while that would be nice, I think it's a little dicey. So that's how I feel about it. I mean, it'd be ideal, but I don't think it's realistic.
Another option is December 14th as a Monday night training. It's just getting closer to the holidays, but.
Yeah, I think this is something we can evaluate hopefully after we've had our meetings with the facilitator for the retreat and see what the agenda might look like.
Anybody wanting to commit to December? Councilmember File?
I would commit to December 14th. So I'll throw that out there. And it would be nice to have an idea when the consultant is going to be wanting to meet with us, so we can, you know, look at our schedules a little bit more in advance and try to move and shift things around, because it is the winter months and the holiday months.
Yeah, I would definitely want all of you there. So if all of you can make December 14th, we can get back to the consultant and see if that works for them.
Councilmember Shrubnik?
So we would not have other agenda items that night? Oh, okay, because that's not a first or fifth.
Well, we were thinking we were going to wrap everything up on your December 7th meeting and be done for.
Then I would definitely go for the, I mean, personally, I'm fine with 14th, but
I'm seeing a couple head nods. Yeah.
We're trying to get away in that time frame, but
Yeah, excuse me.
Councilmember O'Kane?
I'm sorry. If we can get our interviews done before the 14th and evaluate what the agenda is going to look like at the retreat, I would prefer to do it at the retreat. But I can absolutely do the 14th, and I want to be sensitive to travel for council members or other commitments that they may have. But yeah, I'm absolutely available on the 14th and can do that.
I think we'd be hard pressed to get those interviews done by the 14th. Yeah, and you know, if you're out of town, the beauty of this is you can still participate remotely, right?
That's right. You can be anywhere in the world and nobody knows. Be on, even on a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean.
Okay, we're gonna tentatively shoot for the 14th, see if that works for the trainer, and get back to you. Okay, all right, that's all.
All right. Next item is updated on 2017 Integrated Aquatic Vegetation Management Plan and renewal of the city's aquatic plant and algae management general permit and Washington State Department of Ecology, presented by the Environmental Services Director, Mr. Sawyer.
Good evening, Council. Yes, so staff has been working on updating our Integrated Aquatic Vegetation Management Plan, the IAVMP, that was originally produced in 2017. And with me tonight, I have Janet Quinn, who is with Public Works, and Rob Suzette with Herrera Environmental Consultants, who have both also worked on the development of the original plan as well as this update. What I hope to do is provide a brief kind of highlight of what we've been working on, and then open it up for questions, comments from council. So diving right in, can let me share the presentation. There we go. Can everyone see that first slide?
Yes.
Great. So the IVMP, if I try to just put it very simply, is a comprehensive plan that the city's put together with residents and local business owners that develop goals and management strategies for areas of Lake Washington and Sammamish River. The update has focused on a few big items, which I've bulleted here. One of the first ones is many of the management priorities and goals have remained the same. Controlling noxious weeds that are regulated, controlling dominant noxious weed species that we find in the water, detecting emerging noxious weed species and developing plans to manage them. And in this update, we've actually, as we've observed over the last few years, kind of the changes in the plant community and what strategies have worked well and what haven't, we've decided to add control of native nuisance vegetation if it isn't inhibiting recreational and business use. So that's kind of a new goal that's being put in here. As you've heard, from some of the public during their comments, and as well as I've heard from council members from previous meetings. I know that herbicides are not a popular strategy, but it is one that we continue to have in the plan for council and the public to consider. And so we've also updated herbicides, particularly a new one called Priscillacor that is very promising and has lower toxicity and better selectivity when managing plants. So that's been added. We've included a summary of city treatments that have been conducted since the original plan was completed. So we have done treatments in 2018 and 2019, and as well as we did not conduct treatments this year. However, Rob with Herrera went out and conducted a survey in Sammamish River and Lake Washington to see what has been growing out there this year and what the plant communities look like, so that we can incorporate that data into this plan update. The next two bullets are what I'd like to dive into a little bit more detail. So like I've mentioned, the plan does cover goals and strategies for residential and commercial areas, in addition to public areas that the city manages. But I wanted to go into a little bit more detail on what we are recommending for city treatment strategies in the upcoming biennium for 2021 and 2022. And then we are also at the end of a 5-year permit that we're required to have with the Department of Ecology to use herbicides in the lake and the river. So that expires in March of 2021. So I briefly want to talk about what that renewal process looks like. You'll notice here I've condensed some of the material that was provided with the agenda into one slide here. And where I'd like to draw your focus is this map shows the different types of beneficial use areas that we've kind of categorized into commercial, public, and residential. So the green here is areas that have been categorized as public beneficial use areas. And the primary characteristic of this use area is that it connects the community with city-owned properties and parks. So Log Boom Park, Inglewood Wetlands, and then you'll see that the main channel of Sammamish River that connects Squires Landing to Lake Washington has been included. You'll note that there are some shoreline areas of commercial use and residential use, but we wanted to make it clear that there should be a connecting public use area from Squires Landing to the lake that the city should consider when looking at treatment strategies. So based on what we have seen in our treatments in 2018, 2019, and what Herrera saw in 2020, we have narrowed down potential treatment areas for the next 2 years to Log Boom Park, the lagoon area by Squires Landing, and potentially the main channel of Sammamish River from approximately where the bridge, 68th Avenue Bridge, crosses there west to Lake Washington. So just kind of briefly going, I'll start at Log Boom, but we've broken Log Boom into 2 areas, one directly adjacent to the pier, and then an area that extends out a little bit further around the pier. And we wanted to do this to kind of allow us to look at maybe mixing strategies within the park. Maybe something could work well adjacent to the pier, and then something else might work further out. So when I go to the next slide and kind of show that table breaking out different strategies and associated costs, that's what we've done there. And that's also the same for Squires Landing and Sammamish River. You'll see that the lagoon is a separate area, and then the section where Swamp Creek meets Sammamish River is a separate area there that we've taken a look at. kind of diving right into the meat of it here. You've heard, I thought it was at the beginning of the meeting, a few of the members of the public commented on their concerns with herbicide treatment and you know, wanting to look at options for non-herbicide treatments. And I've heard this comment from a couple of council members as well in the past. So what this table represents is I really pushed our consultant as well as myself to look and explore, you know, what non-herbicide options there are out there. We have done this in the first draft of the IEVMP, and oftentimes the real barrier that we have hit is basically the cost of implementing these other non-herbicide strategies. But I wanted to kind of push forward and put together, you know, what those potential costs might be for all these different strategies to the best of our knowledge. So these ranges represent, you know, Rob has a lot of history working with herbicide applicators and other non-herbicide contractors and developed some costs. And I reached out and spoken to some contractors that do non-herbicide applications, and that has resulted in these range of costs that you see before you. It's not surprising, herbicide treatment still comes in as the most cost-effective method for treating all these areas. To treat all these areas over the course of the biennium would range anywhere from $18,000 to $27,000. And some of the factors when you see these ranges, it can really depend on what plant communities are out there, what herbicides or non-herbicide treatments will be needed to target those plant communities. For some of the non-herbicide options, there's a lot of times they're actually removing these plants, so there's usually disposal costs and a lot of labor involved with not only removing the material, but then also disposing of it and transporting the material off-site. How much material is there can really dictate on how fast some of these options will take. Herbicide treatments are often a few hours of one day to go out and treat all the areas, whereas some of the application for these non-herbicide treatments can take days to weeks for one site. For instance, hand diving removal, you know, they may be able to cover half an acre a day, or maybe only a fraction of that, depending on how much plant material that they're encountering. The same with these other ones. Laying out bottom barriers over the bottom, it really can depend on the conditions when they arrive to the site, how much they have to remove. And that will really factor with how fast they can lay it, which will also increase cost considerably. So,
Richard, Councilmember File has a question.
Oh, okay. I can take that now or after.
Thank you. So when you're saying non-herbicide, I'm assuming you mean biocides besides mechanical. Is that right?
So the ones that we are discussing tonight, I've laid out in this table here. So the herbicide treatment in the first column, as you go down, each cost range represents the different areas that we have proposed for potential treatment. And then we've looked at these other options. So suction dredging, which is an actual divers go down and suck up plant material. Shore raking is, that's more just a shore applicable at Log Boom Park to clean the beach. Hand removal and suction dredging kind of go together. Hand removal is just a slower non-suction method, so slightly less aggressive and a slower process. A bottom barrier is just a physical barrier. So you go in and remove weeds and then try to prevent their growth by just actually placing a physical barrier on the bottom of the lake or river.
Hey, Richard, can you talk about the life of that barrier and how often it needs to be replaced?
Well, I still am looking for an answer to the question. I'm seeing the mechanical means, I'm seeing herbicide. I don't see any mention of biocides. Biocides are the vinegar salt solutions that are being utilized, like, for example, in Snohomish County very effectively.
No, I don't think that's being considered here. I'm not familiar with it, but that's a great question. When I finish up this next slide, I'd be happy that Rob is probably more knowledgeable about that and can speak to it. If that works.
Thank you.
So, and then mechanical harvesting is, you may have seen the actual, it's usually a boat that has been fit with a mechanism to actually go out there and rake the surface and remove weeds. And that method oftentimes will have to require several trips throughout the year as they grow. So depending on how fast the weeds are growing, it would have to go back and mechanically harvest those weeds multiple times a year. And then the last column was a more specific technology, just considering for the future of the lagoon. So after Squires Landing has been developed with the upcoming project, algae and detrital material has always been kind of an issue in that lagoon with its slow circulation. So I had talked with one vendor that had a technology called nanobubble technology that is relatively new, but has shown promise in aerating and clearing up ponds and water bodies that have of that nature.
Hey, Richard?
Yeah.
Can you talk about like how often each one of these would have to be done? Like if you did hand removal with a diver, would they have to come back and do that every year? And would the cost be the same every year, or would it last for a couple of years? Same with like bottom barrier. How long does the bottom barrier last?
Sure. Yeah, and each detail sheet covers this in pretty good detail. I'm happy, I can answer that question, but if there's anything I've missed, those are all answered in those detailed sheets that were provided with each section. But for starting with the bottom barrier, talking in best case scenario, you can get a couple seasons out of those. So they do have a higher cost, but they can typically, with one application, last you a couple growing seasons. And I think one that we would had looked at was a biodegradable barrier. So if you go with a non-biodegradable barrier, you do actually have to then go back and remove that when you're done. Whereas they do have some biodegradable ones that will just slowly dissolve and you do not have to go back and physically remove those. But then again, that does have pros and cons. As those biodegrade, they lose effectiveness and have shorter lifespan. The dredging, the hand removal for both the suction dredging and hand removal are also, I think, a longer lasting strategy. They can get down there and actually remove the roots of the plant and really get it out of there, which prolongs the effectiveness of that strategy. Also, you have the added benefit too, when you have a diver down there hand removing these plants, you can be more selective and target species. So we would have more control over what plant communities we want out of there. If there were native plants that we wanted to keep, we've got more selectivity in that. Herbicides can be hit and miss. Usually we have had to do a couple treatments per year. In 18, I would say that we observed better effectiveness than we observed in 19. I think as one or two people had mentioned in the opening comments of the meeting that, you can have great results for a month and then in certain circumstances just start seeing, weed growth coming right back. Particularly in some of the areas that we were trying to treat, which we are not proposing to try and treat moving forward. We have near shore, real shallow areas that you can go in there and try doing treatments, and then it's just coming back very, very quickly. And it's also hard to get in there and effectively treat those real shallow near shore areas, particularly along the river. So back to when we're looking at this cost and one of
One second, Councilmember Shrubnik's got a question.
Sure.
Yeah, I hate to interrupt. I can wait till he's done with the presentation. I thought maybe he's done. Sorry.
Oh. So back to the first two columns, after we've evaluated many of these strategies, as you can see here, we've broken this down into kind of what appears to be the most cost-effective option overall, which continues to be an herbicide. But then we wanted to provide what we consider the most cost-effective non-herbicide strategy, which would be the can removal by divers through suction dredging. And in the proposed biennium budget that's in front of council currently, we have allocated $60,000 annually for aquatic weed management, which would put us right into that ballpark of being able to do the suction dredging option if council wanted to go that direction. Another element which I don't list here that was that comes highly recommended by Rob, and he may touch on later, is that we would include a springtime assessment. I think one of the issues we've had is that we will come in and do these treatments and get, you know, a data point for that time, and then the next year come back and kind of be ready to apply the strategy that we saw, you know, a year before, whereas some, you know, the plant communities could be changing and evolving to where it's really the strategy that worked 12 months ago isn't the strategy you may want to use that year. So we would like to come in and kind of conduct a springtime assessment. So we'll have the consultant go out there and actually evaluate the plant communities that are starting to emerge, where they're coming out, and then that will really help us pinpoint our strategy for how we want to manage the treatment for that year. So related to that, but slightly separate, I mentioned that in order to conduct herbicide treatment, the city is required to have a permit through the Department of Ecology. And we previously acquired this permit back in 2016, or rather the first applicator that we hired acquired this on our behalf. And that permit expires in March. And so we're in the process of renewing that and updating our coverage area. And one thing I did want to point out, you can see on the left, so this was the coverage area that our applicator submitted with the first permit, and included kind of a lot of area outside of that public beneficial use area. So with this permit, we're going to kind of update that area to coincide with the treatment areas that the city's looking at for that public beneficial use area, which will, we're missing a few here. So Squires Landing, you see, was not included, so we would add that, as well as clean up some in the commercial area. The way this permit works is you're actually not allowed to have double coverage. So if we have coverage in this area, for instance, there's no other entity or applicator that can apply for coverage in the same area. They only want one person responsible for coverage anywhere in the state. And currently there was some double coverage through some mix-ups in that commercial area. So that's been adjusted and accounted for. So I wanted to just present this. And it, just to be clear too, it doesn't mean that you can't have the option of doing treatments outside this area. Just if other shoreline areas and commercial areas want to apply for the permit and apply herbicides in those areas, they would just work with ecology and obtain that coverage. But it wouldn't be under the city's permit. It would be through their own permit. And then last, before opening it up to any questions or comments, I did want to point out that we are having a public meeting on the 19th from 5 to 7. We'll be posting a Zoom link on that on the city's website, but we encourage the public, anyone interested, to drop in, and if they've got questions, if they've got comments, feel free to come and let us know. Rob, Janet, and I will be at that meeting as well, and happy to discuss that with the public then. So at this time, I'd like to open up to any questions, comments, and also Rob, Janet, if there's anything specific that pops up I can't answer, please jump in.
Questions? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you for the presentation, Richard. I'm interested in this and looking at the section dredging option, but I wanted to ask: are there any other kind of environmental externalities to dredging with a diver as proposed? Are there habitat issues? Are there any other sort of issues that we need to consider when it comes to suction dredging as you propose here?
Well, one thing I can add, and then I'll let Rob add his thoughts to it, is that yes, and those are addressed. We would have to work with Department of Fish and Wildlife and get an HPA permit through them. And through that permit process, they would outline and address any additional concerns that they have with how we can conduct that strategy. And Rob, do you have any specific comments to add to that?
Yeah, suction dredging's come a bit of a long way. It does create turbidity, so the divers suck the plants and some water and sediment that comes along with it, and they filter out all the plant fragments and retain that. But obviously the water that goes back into the lake is turbid, and that's what the HPA permit is all about, is to ensure that they're able to control the amount of turbidity so it doesn't impact fish and wildlife. And the technology developed by some of the vendors includes actual water filtration to reduce that turbidity even further to prevent impacts. But that's part of the permit process, is to prove to WDFW that the system being used and how it's being used, at the rate at which it's being used, will not generate impacts to fish and wildlife.
Thank you.
Councilmember Shrevenick?
I have a comment and a few questions. So the herbicides that we've been using, both in the write-up and then certainly from the property owners, they don't last very long. There's a limited window in which they can be applied. It's late in the season, and then the weeds grow back pretty fast. I mean, a month or two. So it seems like these chemicals, and that is of course notwithstanding the new ones that are out and we haven't used, but not only aren't particularly effective, but they are pretty disruptive because they need to be applied more than once a year. Each time there's some limited window in which they can be applied, and then there has to be no use of the water in that 48-hour period, I think it is. So compared to, and of course then there's, some environmental impact, although limited, compared to like the diver section dredging option, which according to the report lasts for 2 years. So it's certainly more expensive on an annualized basis, a lot more. I mean, it's, 4 to 5 times, which is, it's non-trivial. But it seems like there's, we shouldn't just consider the financial cost. There's the, the community and environmental costs as well in terms of community time and impact. But I have 3 questions. So do we know anything about the cause of why we are having so much more weed growth? So that's the first. The second is, I was curious about the focus at Log Boom of just the dock area and the statement that there isn't significant weed growth on the shoreline to the west of that. There absolutely is. And it is not that far from shore. In June, it looks great. So when you first look at it in June, if you go back in August, it's choked. That whole area is just choked with weeds. So they are there and they do grow. So that's the second. Why are we just focusing on the dock area? And then the last one, because I didn't quite understand the rationale in the report, is why wouldn't we consider the section dredging elsewhere other than Log Boom? It looked like it was really only being considered at Log Boom.
Yeah, I can. Well, I'll probably let Rob discuss the first two parts of the question. I did not mean to imply that suction dredging would only be considered at log boom. I think the table that I have up there showing the column for the cost, that would be basically at any of the sites. If we were to go with a non-herbicide option, suction dredging would be the.
Yeah, I was referring to, sorry, I was referring to the detail reports, and it looked like it was only called out at the log boom site, but I might have misunderstood that, so.
And then, yeah, in regards to, I can let Rob, well, I can't remember if it was you specifically, Rob, or Eliza, but they were out there at the site in August, so I can let him speak to the plant communities that he observed out there, or that Herrera observed.
Yeah, we didn't see many plants in the nearshore area as you have, as well as the surveys by the herbicide applicators in previous years don't show a lot of plant density. But the reality is it's a very shallow sloped shoreline, so it's very shallow. Within 50 feet of the shoreline, it's only a couple feet deep. You can't really get in there and do anything. And most of those plants are drifting in and blowing to shore. There's not a lot of plant growth in this really shallow area because of the wave action. Has been our observation. So the reason that we focused around the dock was really for boating benefit, not swimming, because swimming's not really allowed, and the boats are being launched near the dock and mooring at the dock, and the dock is the central location for boating activity, and that's why it's focused there.
And just a point of clarification, because I probably wasn't clear, and tons of people swim off at that dock, just FYI. So yeah, I wasn't speaking about the area that is our current like tiny little beach, because that is a pretty shallow grade there. It's to the west of that where all the hand carry and you know, view spots are. I mean, that area just gets choked with weeds. So that's, but maybe, you know, the next time you do the survey, maybe you could look at that area, because we are developing the whole park. So I think we might want to kind of expand our view of what's happening on that shoreline.
And we could. The challenge before us is this is an expansive bed of aquatic plants. You know, it goes several hundred feet off from shore. So do you create a path from the beach for people to get out to open water? Do you clear out the entire area? You know, which would be cost prohibitive, obviously. And I also think I meant to add is most of those plants out there are all native plants. Okay, in the river, we've got Eurasian milfoil, Brazilian Elodea, these nasty invasive plants. But right now we have a very healthy native plant population, too healthy in some people's opinion. And so it's kind of, if you drastically control those plants with a herbicide or wipe them out by a mechanical measure, what do you think is going to come back? And then you're risking reinvasion of these noxious weeds such as milfoil or Brazilian Elodea. So we want to be careful not to over control plants in this area, the Log Boom Park area specifically, because of the dense native population, plants population.
That's helpful, thank you.
Yeah, and I just, that highlights that first bullet too. If I didn't kind of explain the impactfulness of that, but that's the control of native nuisance plants as a new priority is kind of tackling that issue. So we're trying to respond to the needs of the community and what council direction, you know, would like us to go. But you know, this is a few years ago, you know, this was justifiable on a noxious weed argument, but now some of these plant communities have shifted to these native plants. So we do want to, just as Rob pointed out, be careful of how we approach that.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilmember O'Kane.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to commend City Management and Mr. Sawyer for responding to public comment and putting together options that respond to actually one of the first City Council meetings I was at, where Ms. Grayland brought up her concerns about the use of herbicide on our shoreline. And I feel like what you've put together here has made a good case for moving away from herbicide. I also want to just point out that although on the surface it appears more expensive, the longer time benefits for suction dredging or say hand removal do have cost benefits. And anytime we invest in the environment, take the most environmentally sound approach to something, it's an investment in our future and our long-term budgets. And I will speak to this. It's a green job. It's an environmental job that we'd be investing in, providing good quality, environmentally sound work in our, whether it's, you know, local in Kenmore or not, it's good quality work that I think it's very beneficial for our city to invest in. So I just want to thank you very much for the breadth of options that you provided for us today, your responsiveness to council member comments over the past year on this issue, as well as public comment. It's really meaningful. So thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Yes, Councilmember, yes.
Councilmember Marshall, thank you, Mayor Baker. And thank you, Richard. That's, yeah, great responsiveness to get us all the options. I can't remember if you answered Councilmember Srebnick's question about why overall we might see more, or there might have been more plants, that very briefly. And then if you could very briefly summarize this new herbicide option and what does it have in it that's still toxic and how much less than the usual herbicides? Thanks.
Yeah, great questions. And I get one brief comment and I'll let Rob kind of get more into the details. But I think in talking with Rob, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in these treatment areas, I don't think that they are seeing you know, more plant growth, at least in these areas that we're proposing. When they conducted their August plant survey, I think that for the most part, the main channel, Sammamish River, they found was accessible by boats and paddlers and swimmers to get to and from, you know, as far as Swires Landing to the lake, which is why we are, you know, not really proposing the treatment along the shoreline or the main channel unless our springtime assessment really shows that we should be going out there, because plant growth might become a hindrance to being able to use those areas recreationally or commercially. But you can speak a little bit more to that, Rob.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. We looked at, of course, Herrera did a very extensive plant density survey using biosonic sonar readings in 2017 when we created the plan. Since then, in the treatments, the applicators in 2018 and 2019 also did some pre and post density surveys using that same technology. And it's difficult because, you know, different timing of the year, different methodologies of the applicator versus ours, but it didn't appear to us to really change that much. The general trend where the dense plants were located was very similar. Species dominance changed a little bit, and there's reasons for that. But the answer to the question is it does vary from year to year. Plant growth just varies from year to year. Climatic conditions primarily affect. We have good plant years and bad plant years. Has a lot to do with waves and sun and even boat traffic. But we haven't really noticed any significant trends or differences between years. And I will also touch on what Richard was saying. The real reason that we went out in 2020 was a little bit of a disconnect between what the public were saying and what we had seen before. And we went out to verify that, in fact, no, boats can get from the boat launch out to the lake just fine as long as they stay in the middle part of the deep channel and don't wander off to the near shore areas where the plants are growing density. And so that same sort of beneficial use impact really hadn't changed from what we had seen in 2017 when we did a qualitative survey in 2020, not the quantitative one. And I'd love to talk about this new herbicide. It's a very exciting herbicide. Procelicor is. It was developed by the Army Corps of Engineers, and it is very selective. There are several herbicides that have been used in your area. Some that are selective, some that are non-selective, some that are translocated into the roots and kill the entire plant, some that just burn the tops off. So they're all different herbicides have very different control mechanisms in the plants that they work on and the way that they work. Procelicor targets specifically Eurasian water milfoil. And it's not only that, so it doesn't kill any of the native plants. Unfortunately, it doesn't kill Brazilian Ellidia too, but at any rate, it's very specific and selective. And also it's applied at a very, very low concentration in parts per trillion and it has a very short contact time, which is key for the river and the lake. The problem with the river and the lake is water flow, and herbicides do not work well when they're diluted by river flow or lake currents. Procelicor has a very short contact time, matter of hours, that its uptake into the plant and works so that this dilution flow will not reduce its effectiveness. And then lastly, because of these low concentrations that it's applied at, it's shown to have no impacts to aquatic invertebrates or other aquatic life. So it's an exciting herbicide. We'd like for the city to experiment with it at the Squires Landing because that is a very small area, and I think it would be useful to see how well it works in that area as long as the river, and that's why we selected that area as being, and it's totally dominated by milfoil. I'm sorry, that's the number one reason, is Squires Landing is like 100% milfoil, and so it is our personal method of choice because of that and its expected effectiveness, and maybe other areas of the river would be useful in the future if it proves to be as effective as it has shown to be. It was used just this year in 2020 for its first year, and the places that it was used in Snohomish County and elsewhere, people are just marveling at how effective it is and selective it is.
And Rob, correct, it's also not subject to any timing windows, correct?
Correct. Unlike the others, yes, it can be applied early in the summer. That's the other problem with the other ones, that they can't be applied till the last 2 weeks of July. It's the only time of the whole year. And that's because of the salmon sensitivity of this system. So this, your area has more restrictions on herbicides than any other area in the state, than most other areas in the state. But yes, Procelicor doesn't have that same restriction because of its low toxicity.
Mayor, I just recalled too, I was just looking at my notes. I forgot to go back to Councilmember Files' earlier question. I just don't want to forget. She had asked about, I believe, were you familiar with the strategy she was referring to, Rob? Bioassay?
Yes, biocides. Is that what you call them?
Well, biological control methods.
Yes.
So whether you're using biocides such as, the salt.
Yes, well, biological control is a better term than biocides. But biocides, you were talking about salt and vinegar. That would be a biocide, and those aren't allowed to be put in the water. That's maybe for upland, emergent plants. You can spray them with vinegar to control upland plants, but nowhere near the water can you put any of those chemicals. Biological controls are limited to very few things. One is grass carp, which are not possible to use in this scenario. They have to be only used, they're triploid and they don't reproduce, and they're imported from Alabama, but you have to have a way to control them in case they escape, in case they do, you do get one that's reproductive or whatever. So that's not even possible. Another one that has been tried and would be potentially useful in the river is the milfoil weevil. So that's been shown to be effective on milfoil. It's very specific to milfoil. You can buy the weevil, put them in there, and they can potentially self-sustain themselves. But the problem is they typically don't. They have a complicated life cycle. They have to go and climb up on land and excuse me, over winter. And so it's typically at best reduce the population, but it's not a very intensive control mechanism. But it would be something that could be considered, I think, more of a pilot scale testing for some areas of the river where it is dominated by milfoil.
So would this then be an option to try to utilize, that could be utilized even in between those funky seasons that we can't use other herbicides and these lovely little biocontrol methods of the weevil?
I'm sorry, would it be possible to use it where?
Would it be possible to use this biocontrol method of the weevil that you're talking about, like a pilot in just a set area and try?
Yes, actually Squires Landing would be a reasonable place to try that because it's dominated by milfoil. It's fairly contained embayment where the insects wouldn't get washed down the river and could be planted. So it is a possible control technology for that area. I haven't, I know they put some in Capitol Lake many years ago. I haven't, I'll have to do a little bit more research on who's producing the organisms and what other more recent success stories they've had with them.
And the cost as well. It would be
And the
nice to see that as an option. And I would hope that maybe one or a few of our fellow colleagues on the council would like to consider a test pilot in our city of a more biological control method, which is a quality standard to try to incorporate in your aquatic weed management systems. So is any of my fellow colleagues interested in exploring that, or with just a thumbs up? Thank you, Councilmember Marshall.
It's also, I can follow up with Rob. We're happy to explore these strategies and include in the IVMP. I mean, that's what this is for. And if it's not, even if it's not something that might work within our areas, you know, we do remember that this plan is also for our residents and our businesses that might want to explore and understand all the options for their areas as well. So
that would be great, because some of my training with the Association of Washington Cities or MRSC trainings incorporate a good hefty movement towards biological control methods and moving away from others because they're more cost effective and usually you can utilize them quickly and efficiently as long as they're workable within our areas and salmon safe. So I think this would be a lovely thing to try, good for our environment, usually good on the dollar scale budget line, and something worth trying in a pilot area. Thank you. Councilmember Marshall has a question, Mayor Baker.
Yeah, I know. I just said it, but my mic was off. Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you. What is the active ingredient then in the new optional or the new option herbicide then? It sounds like it's really has a small impact or no impact on invertebrates or something, as you said, but what's the active ingredient?
It's a very long word. I'm going to have to look this up for you, but I think I have it here. It is
not related to Roundup.
No, it's not glyphosate.
Okay.
I'll find it. Oh, here it is. Oh no, we didn't put it in the plan, so I'll find it really quick.
That's fine.
I'll Google it really quick. Yeah.
Yep, that's fine. Thanks.
All right.
Any other comments or questions? Not seeing anybody. Richard, do you have any more for us? No, not Richard.
No,
yeah, Richard.
Apparently would just like to, if there was any direction the council would like to provide on.
Yeah, I'm going there next.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure you had everything out that you wanted out.
Did we get to everyone's questions?
I believe we have, yes.
Okay.
All right, so then the question is, staff needs direction on council's preferred 2021 and 2022 aquatic plant management strategy in public treatment areas. So, anybody got anything to say here? Which direction they want to take? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like us to look at section dredging where we can, and I support what Councilor Fowle was talking about trying out a pilot for the weevil, maybe to get the milfoil at Squires. I just think as much as we can keep away from herbicides, that would be a plus.
So are you looking then at the suction dredging over the whole area, first, except for Squires?
I mean, those are just my thoughts.
Okay. Yes, Councilmember Curtis.
Question, what does the suction dredging include the spring evaluation, or is there extra costs for other pieces of this program?
The costs that are on this chart only include these strategies. So I imagine, for instance, when we do that spring assessment, we would work with someone like Rob to contract and go out there in spring, and there will be an additional cost for that. And actually, just communicating with Rob before the meeting, the permit costs, while they aren't extreme, are also not included here. So for instance, if we went with suction dredging, there would be, some costs associated with getting those permits.
So I guess my preference would be to keep all options open. So given areas might have different treatments. So I think this is going to have a major budget implications. So if you include the suction dredging everywhere, and you have to get, permits, and you have to do inspections, and you have to do all these other things, I'm not sure we know how much it will actually cost, but I don't think 60,000 per year is going to cover it.
And that's great feedback. And we can also look at a hybrid approach as well. I guess for me, as long as I can kind of get the direction that if I come back to council in spring asking for you to authorize a contract that's going to cost, upwards of these amounts, you're going to just not be shocked. So if you're, I guess a better question would be, is it too expensive and you don't want us to spend time putting together these options in a plan, and just go with herbicide treatment, or at least for the cost you're seeing for suction dredging, we can explore those further and come back to you with a contract that might be all suction dredging, or maybe a hybrid of suction dredging and then maybe Squires Landing. We can look at these other options, or maybe Priscilla just for that area.
I guess that what I'm thinking, the milfoil area, if it's 100% milfoil, and we have something that's very, very precise and inexpensive and highly likely to work, that would be my thought, that area should be considered for the new herbicide.
Councilmember File, I do see you. Mr. Sawyer, I have a question.
Yes.
On the suction dredging and the sediment that gets stirred up, that's going to also stir up dioxins. And I know dioxins have been found in some of the areas that you're talking about using suction dredging on. How much of a problem is that going to cause, since you're not able to contain all that soil?
I would ask, have you encountered that, Rob? Or is that a consideration that they have?
Well, I've encountered concerns about that, yes. And there are contaminants besides dioxins, with dioxins included, in the sediments that will be suspended in the water column. The problem with dioxins, as you know, it's a bioaccumulative chemical that enters the food chain, and it's a long process. It's not an acute toxic chemical. So there won't have any acute toxicity associated to fish or invertebrates from the suspension of dioxin compounds in those sediments. And in fact, that dioxin will settle right back down where it came from, or close to it, ultimately. So it'll be a short-term suspension in the water column. It will not have an acute toxicity to any organism in the water, and it will settle back where it came from.
Yeah, certainly in a number of different areas, there is big problems right now with dioxin content in the soil and concentration. So any type of stirring up the sediment is a concern, especially there around Log Boom. I see you, Councilmember O'Kane. I need to go back to Councilmember File, and then we'll come back to you.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. So I would approve of an approach that's hybrid. So a little bit of suction dredging, a little bit of this specialized herbicide where it's applicable, a pilot program for Squires. And I did just a quick little Google search and found that the King County Noxious Weed Control Program actually best management practices recommends the milfoil weevil. So if we could incorporate that into a plan, I think that would be great as a test pilot for Squires, and see how that progress works forward. It's always good to incorporate biological control methods in our plans, whether it's land or water. And I think that would be healthy for our community. Moreover, it is green jobs. And we're not just relying upon herbicide or suction dredging, but looking at more natural methods that work here within our own county, as recommended by the King County Noxious Weed Control Program. Thank you.
Councilmember O'Kane.
First, thank you, Councilmember File. That was great information, because my question was I wasn't fully all in for the milfoil weevil until you said that. So I do support moving forward with a pilot program for that, as well as the focus being mainly on the suction dredging. I would prefer not to experiment with herbicide treatment. I don't think that's something that our community is interested in, based on what I've heard at council meetings. And just, I think the effectiveness of herbicide, although there have been improvements, I don't have good faith in it. So I prefer a focus on the suction dredging and other options that do not involve herbicide treatment. So that's, and again, I do think it's the best investment for our community to go with that approach. But I want to note, I think city management has put together great options, and I actually trust that you will choose the best things for each section and propose them to us. But that's my emphasis, would be moving away from herbicide treatment with the best approach for the rest of the area. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, I thank you, staff, for putting together these great options. And I would like to echo Councilmember O'Kane's comment that she made at the very end, which is where I was going, which is, you know, we have two functions as council members. One is policy and one is budget. I mean, we have other functions, but those are the main ones. So I think what you're hearing is the policy direction is toward non-herbicide options, and that we trust that with the budget that we are approving as part of the larger budget, that you'll determine the best options within that general budget framework. I'm a little more hesitant on the Weevil. I guess I just haven't heard enough to be 100%, you know, all in. You know, how frequently do they have to be applied? You know, what is their life cycle? Introducing critters, do they go elsewhere? I mean, I just, you know, what happens when they die? Where do they go? Who eats them? So I guess I'm just not, I guess I'm a little more cautious on the introducing critters into the environment without knowing more.
Any other questions? Comment?
Councilmember O'Kane, I'm guessing I'm not on your screen, Mayor. Forgive me.
No, you are now.
Voice. I just want to say I completely echo Councilmember Shrubnik's concerns about the milfoil weevil. That was exactly my sense. So I would be interested in the milfoil weevil if city looked at it and found it appropriate. If not, then I would not want to move in that direction. So I'd like a little bit more flexibility in that, with staff determination about what the right environmental or bio control would be, or if suction or raking or one of those other options is better. So Councilmember Shrubnik, thank you for so eloquently saying what was on my mind before what Councilmember File said. So appreciate it.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes, I'm also very interested in the weevil. I would like to know how much it costs, though, too, in addition to all the other questions of unintended consequences. And then I echo everything else everybody said.
Councilmember File.
I was just going to close up by saying that it appears to be within the report that insect-eating fish are take care of the abundance of weevil. So there's what happens with all the extra. And it's a simple report. The first report I found was from 2010 for King County. I do trust their department for best practices because they're well regarded for their research and what works and doesn't work within our Puget Sound region without negatively impacting environment or the environment within the habitat, in this case, the aquatic habitat and land. So that being said, I'm happy to forward some information. I'm sure that Mr. Rob, I hope I say this right, Zeseke? No, I tried. My apologies. I hope that you can provide maybe a little bit more information, and I'm sure you're well enough an expert in this area that you can advise us more.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the weevil's been studied for many years here in Washington State. Experimental plots have gone back to all the conferences I've been to. We've listened to the study results, and I'll tell you, there's not really a risk of like a grass carp getting out, and there's an environmental harm from it is considered no risk. The problem is, if anything, you have too many fish that eat them and they become fish food, or you don't have the land and the native plants on the land for them to reproduce, and they become a short-term 1-year season treatment, And that's not the intent. The intent is they would reproduce because, and then lastly, the general public will may hardly even notice their effect. Because they pretty much top off the plants. So the plants still tend to grow up to the surface. They just don't canopy because that's where the plants break off. But with all that said, we will examine this specific site for its attributes and how those attributes potentially would facilitate effective milfoil control.
Great, thank you so much.
All right. So, Richard, have you got enough information to go forward?
Yes, I've received a lot of great info and input. Thank you very much.
All right. All right. Move on. Next item on the agenda is the financial report for third quarter. Ms. Gregory. The September financial report.
Hello again, Mayor, council member.
Hi.
So I'm just going to hit a few highlights and a brief review of the city's financial condition as of September 30th, 2020. And it's hard to imagine that half the year has been spent reacting, responding to the impacts of COVID pandemic on not only our personal situations, but our city hall operations as well. So in the general fund, expenditures have currently outpaced revenues by about $1.1 million. However, this doesn't mean that our revenues have fallen off the cliff so much as this really reflects the timing of property tax receipts, which were due at the end of October. And being in November now, looking back, we can see that we received $1.9 million in revenue in the month of October. So this is what we expected. But we've also had additional operating expenditures that resulted from the pandemic, technology, legal costs, grants, human services contributions, etc. But the good news on this front is that a grant expenditure reimbursement request was sent out just last week to the Department of Commerce for just over $1 million. And even though we don't know when to expect this reimbursement, we hope that that will happen this year. That's the reason for putting that in the budget amendment that we recently discussed. A few more details about the general fund operations. Sales tax continues to hold its own, due, I believe, to about 24% of the total resulting from internet sales. So we've been tracking these sales manually now for a number of months, and we seem to be averaging 20 to 24% of our general retail sales tax coming from internet sales. Utility taxes, not a growing segment of the operating revenue picture and continuing to lag behind our budget projections by about 15%. Development fees and charges are holding steady. We're very happy to see that, even with the negative pressures from the pandemic, but they're holding their own and tracking very close to last year's level, so that's a relief to the budget. And other than the unbudgeted impact of pandemic-related expenditures, the departments are keeping their discretionary spending to a minimum based on the significant expenditure reductions and cuts that we made earlier this year in every department. So in summary, general fund revenues at September 30th, 2020 are $21 million, and the general fund expenditures are $22.9. In the street fund, gas tax revenues were hard hit, but seem to be slowly recovering. The September fuel tax, which is based on August sales, was definitely down about 14%. But then last month it spiked to a level above normal pre-pandemic levels. So that would have been the month of September activity reported in October, and maybe Labor Day had an impact on that. So at the end of September, the city had $23 million in cash investments, with $4.5 million in federal agency investments like Fannie Mae and the Federal Home Loan Bank. We have $1 million in a certificate of deposit, $11.7 million in the local government investment pool with the state, and 5.7 million in interest-bearing savings and checking. Interest rates in September were low, going lower, with the local government investment pool paying 0.2%. So there are many more financial details and indicators included in the agenda report, so I'll complete my comments now and take your questions.
Questions? Not seeing any. Don't see any questions.
I see Rob.
I do too, but I didn't see his hand go up.
Oh, I thought maybe he wanted to add.
Nope, he's shaking his head no.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you. All right, staff report.
Just one item, Your Honor. So as you know, Joanne Gregory has announced her retirement as our Finance and Administration Director. She'll be retiring at the end of the year, which I'm really sad about. But as you also know, we've been going through the process of a recruitment for her replacement. And we've gone through a pretty rigorous process. We had some really good candidates, really pleased with the applicant pool. Very qualified people. It was actually hard to narrow down to where we are at now. But I am in discussions with a finalist and hope to come to agreement with that finalist soon and make an announcement here in the next couple of weeks. So that's where I'm at on that position recruitment.
All right. Thank you, sir. Councilmember comments. Councilmember O'Kane.
Nothing tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Marshall.
Let's all keep believing in the rule of law. Thank you.
Councilmember Shrebnick.
Nothing to add. Thanks.
Councilmember File.
I was just going to add, we've been talking about a little bit about biological control methods with aquatic life. And I hope that we can consider in the new year biological methods for land and water. It's really important that you use biological methods also for pest control. And it's cost effective, it's efficient, very efficient, and it makes good sense. So that being said, I'm really excited to celebrate with our community the early Veterans Day ceremony. So I'll be attending that tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And I wish everybody a happy Veterans Day and thank all of those veterans who have served us so proudly and well, and the families who have given up their time while their loved ones served. And for those who no longer are with us, we honor them for their service. So thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Nothing to add.
I've got just a little bit. I sent out an email this past week asking for council support on the 405 expansion route. This is a route that the 5 cities were very active in getting, and that included the 522 corridor. The 5 cities were Shoreline, Lake Forest Park, Kenmore, Bothell, and Woodinville. We stuck together. We worked hard. We got everything we asked for and a little bit more. And there was a letter of support on the 405 corridor that I asked for people to let me know if they wanted to be included in that support. And I only heard from 2 of you. Kenmore has been very active regionally and has gotten quite a reputation of being a regional player. And that's really put us in good stead. And it's one of the reasons we've been so successful. because we are regionally involved. And I really hope we don't lose that regionalism. The former mayor of Auburn used to say, if you don't want to vote and be involved, I'm happy to vote for you. It's not going to be the way you want to vote, but hey, I'm happy to take your spot. So, you know, if that's what we want, then that's what we want. But I hope that we stay involved and a little bit more open to a lot of the things going around us regionally. That's really all I have, but Councilmember Curtis, I hadn't forgotten you. You got anything, sir?
I do. I have a letter that I just sent to the council. Dear Mayor and Council, I am submitting my resignation from the Kenmore City Council with an effective date of December 31, 2020. Thank you to the citizens of Kenmore for allowing me to represent them for the last 13 years, where I made an effort to contribute to the betterment of Kenmore. I regret not being able to fulfill my full term. And the signed document was just sent. I am available if anybody wants to talk to me privately, other than previous restrictions that I've given. And that's all I have.
Thank you. There's no further business to come in front of us. You have some business, Councilmember File.
I just have a question regarding Councilmember Milton Curtis' statement, and I appreciate that you did let us know and shared that with the public. You said you had some further restrictions. Would you like to share those with us so we can understand what you're talking about?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much. No further business to come in front of us. We are adjourned.